hurdle. So I'm starting at 12:05 in 1 minute, 12:05. So if you haven't made that last... Welcome to the Budget Committee meeting. My name is Deirdre Bartman, Chair of the Budget Committee. We are dealing today with the briefing by the Provincial Treasury on the Western Cape Adjustments Appropriation Bill 2023, the Provincial Treasury briefing on the medium-term budget policy statement, and briefing by Provincial Treasury on 2023-2024 second quarter performance, financial and non-financial. This will be followed by the consideration and adoption of the final mandate report on the revision of Revenue Amendment Bill, Section 76 NCOP, which was postponed from yesterday to today because the National Treasury only sent their responses at approximately 10 o'clock this morning to the province. Then this will be followed by consideration and adoption of draft committee minutes of the meeting held on 23rd and 24th of November 2023, followed by resolutions and actions. Colleagues, I'm going to first ask that the members in the chamber just introduce themselves. I just want to say welcome to the Gauteng Education Committee that is joining us this week on a best practice visit. And then I'm going to ask the members online just to introduce themselves, which will be followed by Minister and the Provincial Treasury team and the respective briefings. And I just want to check the Department of the Premier, I think it's online for the non-financial section.
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. With that, colleagues, all the normal procedures will be followed, the presentations, and then I'll do questions and answers afterwards. Members in the House, if you could please introduce yourself.
Chair, thanks. It's Cameron Dugmore. I'm just attending this meeting. As you know, I'm not a member of the committee. Thank you.
Always welcome. We are making finance fun again, one bit at a time.
Good morning, Chairperson, honorable members, honorable minister, and staff from Treasury. I'm Lulama Mvimbi. I'm the member of the committee.
Good morning, Chair. Khalil Brankes.
Member Brankes, thank you so much. I'm just going to quickly conclude with the members in the chamber, and then I will ask the members online just to introduce themselves.
Good morning,
Apologies, apologies.
Chirizim Nyai, the chairperson of Portfolio Committee on Education in Gauteng. I'm the guest. Thank you very much, esteemed honorable member and esteemed chair.
Welcome, and welcome to the full Gauteng Education delegation as well.
Molweni, igama lam ndinguNomi Kankondlo, ilungu lale committee. Nkosi.
Morning, Honorable Chairperson, honorable members. My name is Bishop Adams. I'm a member of the Education Portfolio Committee from Gauteng. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair.
Morning,
Khalil
Chair.
Brankes.
Member Brankes, I'm going to be with you in just a second. I know that budget has become very, very popular committee this past year, but I will be with the online members in a little bit. I'm just concluding the members in the chamber first.
Thank
Oh,
you,
yes. Sorry, apologies. I thought it's my turn.
Welcome. Good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, Minister. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Derek America. I'm a member of the committee.
Good morning, good afternoon, Chair, good afternoon, members, good afternoon, officials. My name is Christopher Fry. I'm an alternate member of this committee.
Morning, Chair. Sorry, I had to go for a smoke break. Good morning to all the members and everyone else. My name is Sergio Dos Santos, member from the Gauteng Provincial Legislature on the Education Committee.
Thank you so much. Member Brankes, now is your moment.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson, and good morning, good afternoon to yourself. Good afternoon to all the other members, the honorable members, and to all the guests from Johannesburg. My name is Khalil Brankes, and I'm a member of the Budget Committee. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much. If the other members online can also just please introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. Wendy Kaiser Philander.
Good afternoon, Chairperson. My name is Kayla Murray, member of the committee. I just would like to note that I do unfortunately have to step out at 2 o'clock, but Honourable Christopher Fry has offered to stand in for me from that point.
We have received your apology. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to then ask Minister and delegation just to introduce themselves quickly, and then you can jump straight into the presentation.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon to the honourable members of the Budget Committee and honourable members visiting us. My name is Mireille Wengen. I'm the Provincial Minister responsible for Finance and Economic Opportunities. I'm going to hand over to the Head Official of the Treasury to introduce the Treasury team, please.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, members and guests in the legislature. My name is Tulinda Gantana, the Acting Head of the Provincial Treasury. Then over to Taryn quickly.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. Taryn van der Rede. I'm the Head of the Provincial Government Budget Office.
Good afternoon, Annelies Pick. Good afternoon to the members, Chairperson, and the invited guests. I look after fiscal and economic services acting at the moment.
Good afternoon, Chair, Minister, and members and guests. My name is Shirley Robinson. I'm Chief Director of Public Policy Services, and I have the Provincial Government Budget Office and the Fiscal Policy team in my team. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, Minister, members and guests. My name is Malcolm Boyson, Senior Manager Fiscal Policy in the Provincial Treasury.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Pinar. I'm within the Provincial Treasury, Business Information and Data Management.
Afternoon, everybody. I'm Sharon van Breda, the Acting Director for Infrastructure.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's Michelle Nicholas, Provincial Government Finance.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Chad Capon, Deputy Director in Provincial Government Budget Office.
Good afternoon, all. Celeste Minter, Provincial Government Budget Office.
Good afternoon, Chair, members, Katlego Hudi in the Budget Office.
I just want to check for the delegation that is online. If they could just please introduce themselves, Provincial Treasury and Premier officials.
May I?
You may go ahead.
Okay.
Ms. Ishmael.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Zenit Ishmael, responsible for Strategic Management Information, Chief Director in the Department of the Premier and the Head of the Provincial Data Office. Okay, and thank you. I'm online and I'm at the Minmay, so thank you.
Good afternoon, Stephen Kenyon from the Western Cape Provincial Treasury, also at the Minmay. Thank you.
Good afternoon, John Parner, Provincial Data Office, Performance Data.
Good afternoon, everybody. Faisal Nurin, Provincial Data Office in the Department of the Premier. Thank you.
Okay, with that, Minister, we'll jump straight into the presentation.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Chair. We have prepared a presentation for the committee. First, we will present to you the second quarter financial and non-financial performance for departments and entities. In the same presentation, we'll then move on to brief the committee on the Adjustments Appropriation Bill of 2023. And then finally, we'll include slides on the medium-term budget policy statement. So with that, I'll hand over directly to the officials. Thank you.
Yes, Member Dagmar.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, MEC. I just wondered, we just heard the speech by the MEC, and I just had a question or two about the speech. Is that possible that we can deal with it now before it's just a factual
So
question?
usually we do all of it together and then we do questions and answers. So I'll take your question on the speech, but we're going to finish the presentation first because usually the whole MTBPS and everything gets tabled.
So after the presentation,
Yes.
I can ask.
Yes, so we do our presentation, then questions and answers. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. And by the the slides that I'm going to cover actually tries to depict the whole story as we move from the second quarter performance into the adjustment, and then how then we looked at the medium term. So where we find ourselves in the entire budget process, we've dealt with the phase one. Minister spoke to this particular issue in the speech as well, where we looked at budget preparation, and that period covered June to September. And then we find ourselves at the end of phase two today, or moving towards the end of phase two, which will deal with the MTBPS and the adjustment budget, and then also as well as preparing then for phase three, which will then deal with the tabling of the main budget, the period January to March 2024. And upfront, I need to indicate that where we started off the process in total uncertainty in terms of what's going to unfold during the course of the financial year, in phase two, we have a degree of certainty, but we have also obtained that the fiscal environment has deteriorated, but there is still a degree of uncertainty because we do not have at this stage all the information in terms of our allocations for the 2024 MTF. Just to reiterate, the 2023 budget, if we go back, was tabled with no funding provision for the 2023 wage agreement. And for the first time, the in-year fiscal framework was at risk, and that was due to a number of factors, increased debt costs, as well as reduced tax collection. So the wage agreement was instituted centrally, and province incurred the cost with no confirmation of funding from national at the time. Again, overall uncertainty prevailed then during that first phase of the budget process. So in response to the uncertainty and specifically the wage agreement risk, we then had to look at and adopt a risk-led scenario-based approach to recalibrate the baselines of departments. And what the committee would be aware of as we came in even for quarter one, we began to show what that impact would be on departmental budgets, and hence then the projected spending as depicted already when we came for the first quarter results to the committee. So in terms of our quarter two financial and non-financial performance, it indicates that progress has been made in terms of the achieved intended targets. On average, we see that 77% of the targets were achieved. However, service delivery challenges remain, and the higher inflationary pressures remain a risk. And so the adjustment budget that we will also go through during this presentation and the session is then the first response to both in-year risk as well as the anticipated fiscal outlook. There's still a degree of uncertainty remaining at this stage. So the adjustment budget responds to in-year fiscal sustainability by addressing the 2022 2023 wage liability. As I've indicated, the first bullet is saying we started out the year with no funding provision made. So in the adjustment budget, we are addressing that liability to the best of our ability. In here, service delivery pressures is also trying to be addressed. We're trying to address those. And then there are specific allocations in terms of energy, and then to commence our infrastructure response to the floods that we have experienced. And as we go through the detail of the presentation, these allocations made would also be expanded on and give the committee just a little bit more context in terms of that. Then the 2023 MTBPS provides the framework within which the 2024 budget then will be formulated, and it outlines the Western Cape fiscal strategy and key budget policy principles over the medium term. And then it also puts out the proposed budget policy priorities over the 2024 medium term. On the right-hand side of that slide, it just provides the outline of the presentation. Because of the manner in which we started and the particular risk that we needed to respond to in here, we had to look at what our budget principles would be for the 2024 MTF. So we started out by saying we need to protect basic services outcomes, looking at unlocking allocative efficiency. We needed to enhance productive efficiency and enable long-run fiscal sustainability. So that's how we started out the year. Those were the principles that we then crafted our risk-led approach to our thinking in terms of where we're going for the 2024 MTF. We had several discussions, and so in the wash-up of these principles, a number of values were added, but in the main, we remained true to the principles as communicated in the 2022-23 budget cycle. At that particular point in time, as we were preparing for the adjustment budget, we also received the preliminary allocations for the 2024 MTF. And one of the things that became crystal clear with the tabling of the national MTBPS is that we will have to respond to fiscal consolidation. And then as a Western Cape government, it was then prudent of us to also ensure that our principles respond to the ask in terms of fiscal consolidation. So the committee will note that where we started off with a particular articulation of principles when in the 2023 MTF, after we received the preliminary allocation letter, as well as having to respond in here to some of the pressures that we were experiencing, we had to look at fiscal consolidation. And in there, given what was communicated then and tabled, we needed to respond to the wage liability and then also structure the framework in such a way that it actually responds to the tighter fiscal environment or the constrained fiscal environment that we find ourselves in. We then kept the long-run fiscal sustainability it became critical and important for us, given what we were faced with, and so that became something that we needed to also look at as we approach the 2024-25 MTF, and once we get to the detail in terms of the MTBPS, the committee will then get greater clarity in terms of what the initiatives are and the approaches in terms of that. Unlocking allocative efficiency, we remain then given the need, the focus remained to protect basic services outcome. Here we said with growth as an enabler, because it became clear that what was happening with the fiscal framework, we needed also to begin to look at what would be those growth in those enablers that will get us the growth that we would require in order to respond. Minister touched on the issues around the risk approach, and then we had to make provision for the disasters in terms of the climate change and living in the Western Cape. We've experienced quite a number of natural disasters and over a very short period of time, and therefore the need to continue with the response to our unforeseen and unavoidable issues, specifically disasters. And then enhancing productive efficiency, and here very specifically looking at what would be those critical elements that will get us the growth that we so desperately need in order to respond to what is required, what we've picked up, the evidence coming through in terms of both the Mero as well as the Pero table in this House. There are specifically issues around roads, infrastructure, energy, and ports. Some of these things we are not able to directly influence, but we need to recognize the opportunities that we would need to explore in order to give effect to our growth agenda. So I'm going to hand over, Chair. We're going to go straight into the second quarter performance outcomes and hand over to Ms. Ishmael.
Thank you, Chair. So the second quarter, we're going to kick off as we have become practice, a partnership between the Provincial Treasury and the Department of the Premier, with Ms. Ishmael going to take us through the performance outcomes. Just before we kick off there, the quarter two does set the context for the adjustments budget. It's the period from June this year to September. It's the uncertainty that continued in terms of us needing to incur the expenditure on the wage liability, and then also in terms of not knowing and not getting at that time certainty on how if we were going to be getting funding for that wage agreement. Further, it's a period that we saw a deterioration in the fiscal framework at the same time. And in terms of having to respond to that, this is the period that we looked at in terms of commencing a risk-led budget approach for departments, but then also indicating to accounting officers and communicating with them the uncertainties in this period. So with that as the context, and also then, Chair, just to indicate that this is an abridged version of the quarter two. We did submit in terms of detail, a detailed report on last week, Friday. So I hand over to Ms. Ishmael to take us off with performance indicators.
Okay, thank you. So in line with that introduction, and especially the values also of the budget, I'm reflecting on the socioeconomic picture through the provincial strategic implementation plan, and only focusing on key outcome indicators. So some positive signs continue. Our gross domestic product for the Western Cape grew by 0.5% during quarter two of 2023. Our number of people in percentage terms unemployed decreased by 2.1%, and official unemployment rate stood at 20.9%. And I just want to elaborate very quickly on that. So that's quite a positive growth rate in terms of our gross domestic product. If one look at our narrow unemployment rate, and one just look at the period also as we progress to the budget stages, and we look at quarter one, then the narrow unemployment rate actually In quarter one of 22, it was 21.6%. Quarter two, 20.9%. And we've also included the latest quarter three, which is actually standing at 20.2%. So that is quite a positive sign. When you look at the numbers, a decrease by 2.1% in quarter two, and a further decrease by 3.1% in quarter three. And if one look at the expanded unemployment rate, in quarter one, it was 24.9%. It then decreased to 25.3%, and quarter three, 25.6%. So in line again with the budget values, if one look at the priority areas, and safety as one of them, one see an increase in violent crime, also as the indicator, increase in violent crimes, homicides in the Western Cape increasing by 14.5% year on year from quarter two. If one look at the 13 priority areas in Cape Metro, it recorded 14.9% increase in homicides. This accounted for about 52.8% of all homicides in the province, and 7.5% increase in the number of sexual assault percentage at public hospital compared to last year. So if one just look at homicides, about 1,246 homicide in quarter two, compared to 1,088 in quarter two of 2022. So that is just if one compare 2022 to 2023. So there's an increase. If one compare the sexual assault, then 1953 sexual assault presentation in quarter two of 2023-24, and that's about 50.6% of these were under 18 years old. Then lastly, when one look at the well-being, the HIV positive rate for 15 to 24%, 15 to 24-year-old for the first quarter was 1.4%, 6%, and 12.02% of children born in government facilities weighted under to 500 grams. Thank you. Then one get closer to our institutional environment, and one look at our own performance targets that we measure, and our own achievement against that targets across the 13 departments and also our public entities. So our formal targets do not correlate strongly with either of the socio-economic conditions or within our expenditures. However, as the acting HOD alluded from the start, our overall performance for quarter two is 77%, and that's about 408 of our 502 targets. And if one look at the previous quarter, and then one see actually 74%, although there were kind of less targets out of 470 targets. Just going into the performance overview of the departmental APP performance. We achieved 346 of 443 targets. None of the 13 departments achieved 100% of all their targets, and they all provided substantive reasoning. Partially achieved 66 targets, it's 15%, and not achieved 31 targets, 7%. One look at the clusters, then one observe the government cluster achieved 92%, social cluster 74%, and economic cluster 72%. Just another view of the public entities that makes up together with the departments the overall performance. The public entities achieved 62 of 84 targets. 4 of the 10 public entities achieved 100%, partially achieved 15 targets or 18%, and not achieved 8%. Public entities, according to the clusters, the government cluster achieved 75%, social cluster 69%, and economic cluster 76%. Thank you. When one just look at this from a graphical perspective, and one look at this bar chart, and one look at then who achieved above and below the Western Cape departmental average. Then one sees 7 departments achieved more than or equal to the Western Cape government average of 78%. And that is the Department of the Premier, Treasury standing at 93%, local government 84%, social development 87%, POX very strongly at 96%, agriculture 89%, and Department of Mobility as a new department 87%. 6 departments achieved less, and one can see education, health and wellness, TCAS, infrastructure, economic development, and Department of Environmental Affairs. Thank you. Just another view of the public entities with the average of 74%, and then one look at 7 public entities achieved more or equal to that 74%, and one can see it is the Western Cape Government Racing Board, the Western Cape Culture, the Western Cape Culture Commission, and the liquor licensing entity, Westgrow, Cape Nature, and Atlantis. And then one look at the Liquor Authority, Casidra, and the Freeport, Saldanha. Thank you.
So when we look at the financial outcomes for the second quarter, and this is the outcomes that has been presented and submitted to the National Treasury as per the Public Finance Management Act. And so as of 30th September, 6 months into our financial year, the table on the top half of the table indicates in terms of spending for the votes, and then the bottom half of the table gives you in terms of economic classification or expenditure items spending for ourselves as a province. So as at the 30th of September, we spent about 48.4% of our just over 80 billion rand of our budget. Further, as indicated also in our quarter one, we were projecting an over expenditure. That of expenditure amounted to about 3.5 billion rand. And when we look at in your economic classification, majority of that is on compensation of employees due to the wage liability. As I indicated at that time, we were still not aware of how we would be compensated for the expenditure we were recurring at that time. Further, we also have the Department of Health and Wellness that was showing in terms of expenditure pressures, especially on their goods and services. And you can see that that is what we also reflected as a province in terms of pressures on goods and services. And this is mainly in terms of the pressure within the health sector. So it's not only within the Western Cape department, it's also within the health sector that we find that our firstly, when we're putting our budgets together, the health sector has medical inflation that is a plus minus 2% above CPI. And our revenue envelope is not keeping sometimes within the CPI, and therefore it's very difficult to allow for medical inflation. So certain of those cost drivers within health were showing pressures already by the 6 months into the financial year. And at that time, health was looking at and still looking at various ways that they were going to, that they are mitigating the risks on their goods and services. And you'll see that the adjustments budget will then also give you some kind of indication on how health has responded to some of the risks that they were facing. Then when we look at compensation of employees on the next slide, this slide in terms of is prudence to our COE strategy. First half of the slide provides you in terms of spending per department on compensation of employees, and the second half gives an indication on head count or head movement. Head movement is very important for us in the province because that is key to our COE strategy in terms of trying to keep the head count as low as possible. So in terms of the outcomes we find ourselves as at 30th of September, and we compare it to the 1st of April from the beginning of the financial year, there's been a net increase in that 6 months of 95 staff members. Majority, as we would expect, is found in the social sector, mainly in terms of education,
as we do know the social sector needs to deal with a growing demand, especially for their services. And therefore, in terms of increasing their service platform, they also responding in terms of filling posts in terms of where they could, and therefore the majority that you see is an increase in high headcount where that's concerned. Just the other perhaps outlier that it appears to be an outlier, the Department of Mobility and the Department of Infrastructure. Those are newly formulated departments for the current financial year. And so what you see there is in terms of the shifting of the Program 1 staff. There's been a management arrangement in terms of those two departments, where in terms of the Department of Infrastructure was doing a management arrangement for the Department of Mobility. And then over the course of the period, they were shifting in terms of staff in terms of to the department, from Department of Infrastructure to the Department of Mobility. And so you'll see there's a cross reference in terms of the numbers of headcount where those departments are concerned. Moving along to spending on public entities, our public entities have spent 6 months into the financial year, 47.7% of its budget. No risk necessarily indicated within public entities. However, public entities were also given indication that they needed to make some prudent decisions around COE because of the uncertainty that we were facing within the province. And therefore, you'll see partly the Western Cape Liquor Authority was showing an underspending of about 4.2 million, and majority of that was on COE. When we move on to the next slide, is looking at the own revenue expenditure as of the 30th of September. So here, the own revenue that is made up of, firstly, in terms of own receipts by departments, the main budget consists about 600 million. Then in terms of provincial revenue fund regarding our taxes from gambling, the main budget there consists of 991 million. And then majority of our revenue is motor vehicle license fee, license taxes, and that's about 2 billion, just over 2 billion rand on main budget. So all in all, a budget then in terms of our own revenue about 3.6 billion rand. So as of 30th of September, the collection then on these various sources, in terms of we were showing no risk in either of the sources of revenue. Own receipts at that stage, we have collected about 430 million rand. Majority of that is within the Department of Health and Wellness, our health and patient fees. And then on the gambling side, we collected about 66% of our revenue there. And then on motor vehicle license fees, there was about 48% of our collection at that stage as at 30th September. As I indicated, no risk at this stage in terms of the collection of revenue as 6 months into the financial year. Then infrastructure, when we look at our spending as at 6 months into the financial year, we spent 33.3% of our budget. When we compare that to the previous financial year, it is less. Main reasons for that is the flood damage that we saw in terms of May, June, and then also September. That had an impact in terms of infrastructure rollout for us as a province. And then also various of the departments then showed in terms of disruption at project level within communities. And then also in terms of the acquisition of land also, and the impact that has on projects, and the lead time for that has also disrupted some of the pipeline on projects for where infrastructure is concerned. So the infrastructure as at this stage, as reported as the 30th of September, that the impact then of the wage agreement does not then reflect in Q2 as yet. As I indicated, it's all in the adjustments budget in terms of how we then responded to the risks that the acting HOT indicated that we saw when we got our allocation letters, both for the adjustments budget and then also for the medium-term expenditure framework for 2024. I can move on then to the adjustments budget. And so as before, the adjustments budget has two main responsibilities. Firstly, is to deal in year with all the pressures that we were seeing at that time. If you cost just about 3.5 billion rand, we were showing as over expenditure. And then secondly, we also then have the adjustments budget that becomes in terms of a first response for the 2024 main budget. And so, as indicated, the 2024 budget also then saw 2024 MTF was shown us in terms of fiscal consolidation. And so the adjustments budget then also deals with fiscal consolidation for the wage liability in the adjustments budget. There's reductions in conditional grants. In this adjustments budget, we looked at the rollover of previous year's underspending and as well of the overcollection of revenue of the previous year. There's a realignment of energy funding within the adjustments budget. Our in-year fiscal risks that was indicated to us as the provincial treasury is in terms of the increased cost on Microsoft licenses, and that's mainly driven by the increase in the foreign exchange rate compared to what we budgeted. As I indicated, the floods we're all aware of in terms of that was as now, and not at this time, but has now been declared a disaster. And then also the additional education classrooms, and then the health pressures, as I mentioned in the Q2 report. So for the adjustments budget, there is an additional 1.4 billion rand that is in terms of for appropriation. And then the table 19 there indicates to you in terms of the impact then in terms of each of the departments and on their main budget. So we're moving from a 80.3 billion rand budget to 81.7 billion rand in this financial year. When we look at how that almost 1.5 billion rand is being sourced, that source is in terms of firstly. For the wage agreement, we were indicated partial funding for about 1.7 billion rand. And this is only for health and education. In the national conditional grants, as I indicated, a reduction of 642 million, therefore a net increase from national fiscus of just over 1 billion rand. From provincial fiscus, there's a net 394 million rand that we are adding. The main reason in terms of adding 394 million is in terms of trying to respond to the in-year pressures, firstly. But secondly, as I indicated, it is also to respond to the reduced fiscal framework that was indicated in the 2024 MTF. So overall, the adjustments budget tries to limit allocations as much as possible to give departments then that opportunity to realign budgets through this financial year into the 2024 MTF to assist from a sustainability perspective those votes. Just in terms of some of the main funding in terms of provincial funding, it was acquisition of property for education and education and health properties. And then I already mentioned the education classrooms of about 56.4 million. This is really to compensate in some manner for the reduction on the education infrastructure grant in year. Those infrastructure projects, they were planned projects to plan for the growth that we're expecting in January and the influx of learners, with a reduction therefore in the conditional grant that they no longer became possible, and therefore the provincial fiscus tried to respond in terms of the education infrastructure plans. On the provincial on rollovers amounting 175 million, majority of that is for health, and then also some infrastructure projects that is in terms of finalization from previous financial year to this financial year. So in terms of, on the next slide is a fiscal consolidation. This is really for us to respond to the wage liability and then also the in-year pressures. It was posed to us in Q1 that if we knew if we were showing that we were overspending on wage agreement, I mean, how were we going to look at funding the wage agreement if no funding was going to be received? That was one of the questions posed in the Budget Committee in our Q1 session when we sat here. So what we did is in terms of, we looked at in terms of fiscal consolidation. Now, fiscal consolidation, another word for that, is also in terms of trawling from votes, to see in terms of what we can actually reduce votes by, in order to fund the pressures that we were seeing, because as I indicated, we wanted to limit adding any funding to votes from the fiscus itself. And so what we were able to do is in terms of about 2.9 billion rand is in terms of what we then looked at in terms from each of the votes. We identified what could be used for fiscal consolidation. I must indicate that they doing this also then meant that there is in terms of a risk in terms of service delivery, and also in terms of reducing certain services also in here within the province in order to do so. And then in terms of from this fiscal consolidation, let's say, pot that we've created, we then funded in terms of the wage agreement, in terms of especially those departments that received no funding from the National Fiscus for the wage agreement. And you can see there per department what we have then funded to the value of 243 million rand. And then in terms of funding pressures, and especially within the social development sector, they indicated to us in terms of some of the funding pressures that would be that they would need to bear if those fiscal consolidation and those reductions would continue for them, impact on the number of teachers. For example, relief teachers that they would not be able to hire, impact on infrastructure that they would need to reduce if the fiscal consolidation was then imposed on them. And so you'll see for the social sector, then we funded those numbers back in order for them to have flexibility within their various votes in order to deal with the funding pressures. So in a nutshell, the wage liability for us, we costed the wage liability at about 2.8 billion. The funding that we received, as I indicated, for health and education was 1.7 billion, leaving then the shortfall of 1.1 billion rand. Further, in the next slide, in the adjustments budget, we're showing you in terms of just some of the allocations, and we're highlighting some of them out of that 1.46 billion rand. I've already covered in terms of funding from the National Fiscus. There was rollovers on conditional grants. In total, about 406 million when we add the conditional grants to rollover. We had over collection of revenue in the previous financial year. Majority of that in terms of motor vehicle license fees, and therefore in terms of then funding pressures in the current financial year, the agency fees on motor vehicle license fees then receives the biggest share of the over collection of revenue. In terms of health, they have also then used in terms of their over collection of revenue towards the pressures that they showed us and reported to us in the second quarter of the financial year. Health has also increased its own revenue in terms of increasing its outpatient fees, but also in terms of at the Western Cape College of Nursing, they've also then increased their collection of revenue in here to deal with the pressures that they're facing. From the asset finance reserve, the Department of Public Works were accessing 20 million, and this is mainly in terms of the reduced revenue that they were projecting to receive in terms of leases. In terms of unforeseeable and unavoidable reserve, we had 550 million rand when we tabled the budget for unforeseen and unavoidable expenditure. And here it was a response in terms of number one, the fluctuation in the exchange rate for Microsoft licenses that we funded, and then also there's in terms of response for flood damage. This adjustments budget also accessed for 24-25 financial year for roads and infrastructure to the value of about 193 million rand, and it's accessed this year for allocation for 24-25 due to the lead times and planning that is required for the infrastructure departments. In terms of the wage liability, I've also indicated we funded there the non-social development, social sector departments to the value of 243 million. And then there's also a decrease for realignment and surrendering of funds by the various departments. And this is really to realign baselines and to prepare ourselves for the 2024 MTF that we knew there was a fiscal consolidation reduction that we needed to respond to as a province. So the impact then in terms of on infrastructure in the adjustments budget. So the impact in there that we see from our main budget, we had a main budget on infrastructure of about 11.7 billion rand. This adjustments budget reduces our infrastructure spend by 855 million rand. One of the reasons being is in terms of where votes needed funding in terms of to deal with the shortfall on wages. Some of them decreased infrastructure, especially in the social sector. And then also there has been in terms of reprioritization and a decrease, mainly as I indicated, the impact on floods on projects, and therefore there's also a reduction and reprioritization on infrastructure where that is concerned. All in all, so you'll see there on infrastructure, for example, a reduction. The biggest reduction is 372 million rand. That is a combination in terms of a 200 million that they realigned from the current financial year to next year to deal with the planning of projects to respond to the flood damage going forward. The detail that you can find per department in terms of explaining all the adjustments is in terms of on the 2023 overview of adjusted provincial, municipal and infrastructure investment booklet. Then when we look at that same lens of infrastructure in terms of category to see in terms of actually what is the impact on the category of spend and expenditure within infrastructure, you'll see then in order to respond to the flood damage, there's been a shift from from refurbishing and rehabilitation to maintenance and repair to respond immediately to the flood damage. Then you'll also then see there's a reduction in new infrastructure where we were now not sure in terms of what our overall 2024 MTF allocation is, and therefore due to uncertainty and to respond to the wage agreement, some of the new infrastructure, and especially in terms of schools, that has been reduced in this adjustments budget. Moving then to the medium-term budget policy statement, Chair. There, I'm going to hand over to Taryn van der Rede to take us through the medium-term budget policy statement for 2024.
So essentially the 2023 medium-term budget policy statement is set within the economic context of slow growth and rising inflation. When looking at world output, projections indicate a slowdown in global growth, and you'll see this coming through in terms of 2022, where there's a reduction from 3.5% to 3% in 2023, and then a further reduction to 2.9% in 2024. We see similar trends in terms of South Africa's economic growth, where we're also seeing a reduction from 1.9% in 2022 to 0.6% in 2023, and then an increase to 1.1% in 2024. The SA outlook is hampered by, as members are well aware, the electricity shortages, inflexible labour laws, restrictive procurement and supplier regulations, as well as a deteriorating rail and port infrastructure. The Western Cape's economic growth outlook also follows that of South Africa's trends. So yeah, we're also seeing that the province is expected to expand by 0.9% in 2023 and 1.5% in 2024. And this improvement is largely also as a result of the resilience of our finance sector. Then in terms of SARB's repo rate, they have reported a 8.2.5% repo rate, which is steady since May 2023. However, on the other hand, South Africa's inflation is increased since July 2023 to 5.9%. So this increasing inflation trend also has a risk of rising repo rates, which will also impact on the purchasing power of citizens going forward. Then just briefly in terms of the labour market, you will see on the right-hand graph, in the third quarter of 2023, the Western Cape narrow unemployment rate is reported at 20.2%, which is a 7.8 percentage points lower than fourth quarter of 2021. What is of concern is our high youth unemployment rate in the Western Cape, which is currently at 27.5% in the third quarter. The African youth has the highest unemployment rate recorded at 37.3%. This is followed by coloured at 23.1%, Indian at 19.3%, and then white at 7.3%. What is positive, though, is that since the third quarter of 2018, the youth in the Western Cape gained over 239,000 employment opportunities, which accounts for 81.5% of new labour force entrants. I'm just going to briefly hand over to Ms. Pick to take us through the fiscal framework.
So as the HOT indicated, when we received our allocation letter for the 2024 MTF and then the tabling of the MTBPS, what was clear that was coming through from the national MTBPS is in terms of national government, in terms of aiming to achieve fiscal sustainability, and their strategy there to do so is to narrow the budget deficit firstly, and secondly to stabilize debt. So the consolidated budget deficit then in terms of narrowed from 4.9% of GDP in 23-24 to 3.6% in GDP in 26-27. Then further, equitable share, the largest source of funding for us as provinces. There was an increase of 68.2 billion rand over the 2024 MTF, and this was partially to compensate provinces for the carry through from the 2023 wage agreement. Again, as in the adjustments budget, for this funding was only for health and education. So what was the impact then for us as a province with the strategy at the national level? So as I indicated, PES remains in terms of our most important source of funding. It accounts for about 77% of our provincial revenue envelope. And there was 3 significant changes then to our provincial equitable share. The first one, in terms of our share of the 6.68 billion rand for compensation of employees, our share amounted to about 7 billion rand. So that is an addition to our equitable share. Second, was a fiscal consolidation for us as provinces. That fiscal consolidation at the national level amounts to about 61 billion rand. Our share of that reduction then amounts to 6.3 billion rand, and that's in terms of a negative. Further, and thirdly, the changes and technical changes then in terms of the PES formula, in terms of the updates it was utilized, there's a reduction then for us of 379 million rand. So when we look at the reductions then on our PES, and in terms of a recurring impact on our PES, there's 6.7 billion rand fiscal consolidation reduction then for us as the Western Cape over the 2014 MTF. We must be reminded that the wage agreement funding is a carry through from the previous financial year, and therefore does not in terms of impact baselines and spending ability of departments. It's expenditure that is in terms of that we've been incurring, and therefore the partial funding thereof, that it takes care of, but it does not increase our spending or our increase in service delivery whatsoever. So our preliminary fiscal framework, when we look at that and all the different sources, because in terms of we received some kind of certainty in this round of the budget process, we don't have certainty as much as we might require. And one of the main reasons for that is that we do not know in terms of the impact on conditional grants of us as a province at this stage. That we will only be getting an indication in the middle of December in terms of what those conditional grants outcomes are, but we are expecting reductions where conditional grants are concerned. The provincial equitable share there over the MTF is a 305 million rand addition as indicated, and that is in terms of the net effect of the addition of the 7 billion, the reduction of the 6.3 billion, and the reduction of the 379 million. That net effect is 305 million over the MTF on our equitable share. On our other sources of revenue, this being tax at this stage and motor vehicle license fees, there's no increases. We're not amending anything, any of those sources as the stage in our fiscal framework. Mainly in terms of when we're looking at our tax from gambling, we are waiting for a more of a stable trend, and therefore we're waiting for end of December, the collection of revenue to have an indication of what the real impact could be on our fiscal framework. And on our tax receipts at this stage, we are reviewing an application by the Department of Mobility for a 4.5% tariff increase at this stage for the motor vehicle license fees. So that has not been factored into this fiscal framework as yet. Then in terms of that 6.7 billion rand that I indicated, the reduction for us over the MTF. This slide indicates to you again, it shows the phasing in, the impact, a negative 379 million rand, the fiscal consolidation reduction of 6.3 billion rand over the MTF gives us then that reduction of 6.7 billion rand. The provincial treasury then has, in terms of looked at all its sources of funding, especially in terms of the prudent decision making in the adjustments budget process, where we try to limit all the allocations to departments when they applied for rollover and revenue and over collection of revenue from the previous financial year. We limited that as much as possible. We've then also accessed in terms of the stabilization fund for which we budgeted for over the 2023 MTF, and we accessed that, and then that total that we were then able to draw down from the Provincial Revenue Fund amounts to just under 4.1 billion rand. That still then gives us a shortfall of 2.6 billion rand. This is the 2.6 billion rand that was then mentioned by the Minister in the speech that indicates that we still now need to reduce baselines of departments by 2.6 billion over the 2024 MTF to the value of 855 million in the first year, 846 million in the second, and 943 million in the third year. This will impact service delivery for us in terms of 2024 MTF and the rest of the budget process as outlined by the head of Treasury in our phase 3, we'll then look at how we mitigate the impact on service delivery as much as we can, but it does mean looking at in terms of where do we reduce. It does look at in terms of where we can get more efficiency of spend from within votes and then also across votes as the last phase of this budget process that we're going through between December and February. So what does our reserves then look like? I indicated that we draw down from the stabilization reserve that we established in the 2023 main budget. And so after drawing down from those reserves, we still have an unforeseen and unavoidable for 24-25 and going forward in terms of 500, 600 and at this stage 272 in the third year of the MTF. That's about 1.3 billion rand. Acquisition of property. We know there's a lead time for this kind of purchasing of property, and so we have formulated a reserve many years ago in order to access this, usually through the adjustments budget. That is about 251 million in reserve, and then what is remaining then from the energy funding is about 85 million rand that is now gone in the reserve. So when we look at the 2023 MTF, we had reserves that started out at 3.7 billion rand. And you can see that for the 2024 MTF that we're going into, we have reserves remaining of about 1.7 billion rand. And that was mainly the difference there is in terms of to counter the fiscal consolidation reduction that I spoke of. So I also then indicated the 2023 stabilization reserve has then been depleted for the fiscal consolidation response that is required. Taking us then through in terms of some of how we respond to the risks that I indicated, because there are risks that's remaining for us. Ms. van der Rede will take us through that.
Okay, so as part of the broader policy planning and budgeting process, and through our PGM Tech 1 engagements, collectively the departments identified a number of risks and service delivery pressures. These do cut across our policy priority areas of safety, well-being, innovation, culture and governance, as well as growth for jobs. In response to these risks, we have also identified a number of fiscal or non-fiscal mechanisms, as well as a mix between fiscal and non-fiscal measures. However, given the constrained fiscal envelope, we are also acknowledging the fact that we can't only have a fiscal response to managing these risks. And therefore, as the Provincial Treasury, we're working quite closely with the Department of the Premier to apply the enterprise risk management process, and also trying to get certain of these risks within a tolerance level where we limit the impact on the citizens. In addition to the ERM process, we are also identifying measures of innovation in order to drive efficiencies and effectively manage these risks. As part of our fiscal approach, we have also identified a number of transversal levers. Next slide. A number of transversal levers that's really aiming to drive effective service delivery. These include compensation of employee strategy that is developed between the Department of the Premier and the Provincial Treasury. And here it's not just about managing headcount, but also trying to apply efficiencies and technology in order to overall manage our COE budget. The Provincial Treasury, in partnership with GTAC, has also conducted a number of expenditure reviews over the years. And this year, we're really trying to hone in on driving those recommendations and making sure that across the departments they are implemented. We're also looking at our approach to revenue, where we are optimizing our revenue sources, but also doing some research in terms of identifying alternative sources of financing and blended financing. From an infrastructure perspective, it's also looking at how we can drive economies of scale, but also looking at alternative methods of financing infrastructure as well as building partnerships. Then supply chain management is about strategic procurement and also driving efficiencies through applying technology. Deepening governance is really about how we enhance our systems, processes, and people. And then oversight and governance of entities is really about us implementing our public entity guideline. And we're also in the process of completing our public entity review. Then lastly, in terms of our transversal levers is also the integrated service delivery approach, which is really about how we implement our JDMA and also drive integration between province and municipalities. Then the next two slides just provides us with a brief overview of our budget policy priorities. I'm not going to go through the detail of each of these, but just to highlight some of our critical areas. So recently, in terms of green hydrogen, we signed an agreement between the Eastern Cape and the Northern Cape. In terms of ease of doing business, it's really about driving red tape reduction, but also looking at regulatory reform across Western Cape government departments as well as municipalities. Then we also have our Western Cape climate change response strategy. So we're really trying to identify which governance structures we need to be able to put in place in order to drive the implementation of the strategy. As was previously also alluded to was our Western Cape government energy response. And we have a number of projects identified in the MTBPS, which is really trying to drive our transition to net carbon zero. Then on the next slide, in terms of safety, also not going to go into the detail, but just outlining our key 2 projects is in terms of LEAP, and so the deployment of over 1,000 LEAP officers, but also establishment of our LEAP stations. And then we also have the establishment of the Violence Prevention Unit within the Department of Health and Wellbeing. And that's also taking a data-driven approach to our safety approach, as well as applying our area-based teams. Then with regards to wellbeing, some of our key projects just to highlight here is the Back on Track program within the WCED, and that's really trying to target our learning losses as a result of the impact of COVID. We also have the Rapid School Build program, which is really about the construction of new classrooms and schools, given the major influx of learners into the province. And then with regards to innovation, culture and governance is, as I alluded to previously, is the implementation of the JDMA with regards to our integration with municipalities. Disaster management is taken in an anticipatory disaster management approach. And then also the extension of our broadband initiative, which also focuses on broadband 2.0 and also us managing the implications of cybersecurity. And with that, I'm going to hand back to the Head of Treasury.
Thank you to the team. Just in terms of concluding the presentation, I think to the committee, really an indication that our mounting fiscal challenges means that there is a need for decisive and prudent policy decisions to ensure that we limit and safeguard the impact to all our citizens. The AG also speaks to the lived reality. Our budget principles also speaks to really looking at the outcomes and trying to limit the impact thereof on the citizen. The 2024 spending plans drive our growth for jobs strategy, strengthen citizen safety and protect essential services that affect the well-being of all citizens. And while fiscal and non-fiscal measures are applied to manage the risk, we acknowledge that the risks remain over the 2024 MTF. Just the size, the quantum of what we need to consolidate or what we would need to retract means that risk will remain, but I think we have also shared with the committee the risk-led approach with which we are approaching the 2024 MTF. So although we are facing this stark reality, every effort will be made through our solid foundation of good governance to manage these circumstances during this very difficult time. And as a Western Cape government, we will continue to make fiscally responsible decisions to ensure and drive service delivery. In Minister's word, a budget to build a future.
Thank you so much. Colleagues, we are now going to deal with questions. Please, when you ask your question, if you can just refer to the respective presentation or book. I'm going to see hands in the chambers first, and I'm going to ask that we stick to 3 questions each, just so we can give enough members opportunity to ask questions, and we can always have a second round of questions after that. I will see hands now. Member Dugmore, America, okay, Vimby. I'm gonna do the permanent members and the alternate members first, and then I'm gonna do guests. Don't worry. Member Kondla, I'm sure that you're also interested in our budgetary matters. I just want to see quickly online. Are there no hands online? Okay, in that order. Thank you. Dugmore, America, Mumbi, and Kondla.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks again to the MEC and the department for the presentation. The first issue, I just wanted to draw the MEC's attention to page 18 of her speech, sort of towards the middle. The speech says, to protect our people, the 2023 Western Cape Adjustment Budget makes provision for a net addition of 1.458 billion. And then just a little way down, it says this is carefully comprised of 835 million for education, 931 for health, 18.51 for social development, and then without a figure being quoted, additional funding for energy and jobs. Now, if you then go to page 23 of the presentation, there's an indication there of 37.6 million for schools, solar photovoltaic, and then 64 million for a pilot renewable energy solution in the Department of Local Government. Now, it would seem to me that if you just add up the figures of the carefully comprised, you're already on, 1.784 billion, whereas the net addition is stated at 1.458. So when I'm reading the speech, when you say that a net addition of 1.4, and then you say it's carefully comprised of, if you add up those figures, it already comes to 1.784, which is roughly 300 million more than the 1.458. So if you could just explain, what is actually going on there. And then, linked to that, would you confirm that the 64 million for pilot renewable energy solutions in the Department of Local Government, how much of that goes to consultants of that 64 million? And, how much of it goes for instance, generators or actual infrastructure? Because we've been concerned, Chair, that, since 2021, we've had this municipal energy resilience project, and there's literally, I think, been, like millions and millions pumped into it without any firm proposals as to the cost of providing energy to the consumer, etc. Now we have another 64 million. So my question on that is, does that 64 million, how much of it, in terms of this adjusted budget, goes to consultants and how much to actual infrastructure? Those are the two that I'm going to ask at the moment. Thanks, Chair.
Member America.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Thierry, for the presentation. And Chairperson, I want to ask my first question on page 12 of the presentation, and that relates to spending on CRE as at the 30th of September. Now, I just want to specifically focus on mobility. It has an increase of 541 employees. And the explanation was that those are the employees that move from infrastructure to mobility. It's a new department that was created. That being so, Chairperson, if one look at the headcount on the 1st of April, that was the date on which the new department was established. It was an existing headcount of 441. And then subsequently it increased to the amount that is stipulated in the table. Now, maybe we can get more clarity as to where does that 441 sort of emanate from, because in terms of the old structure, Department of Transport and Public Works, was that all of the employees that move over to mobility, or majority of them, came from that department, and does that sort of the head count of those employees, are they also counted into the 2,526 of the Department of Infrastructure at that point in time? So, and then, Chairperson, the second question relates to the the collection, actual collection for this particular period. Now, it is anticipated that we will have an increase in own revenue collection over the this financial year. Based on the trends, are we still sort of on track to receive those collections that we have budgeted for, and because it is certainly part of the financial sort of consolidation sort of strategy that we have embarked upon. And then thirdly, Chairperson, that relates to the consolidation response, and it is on page 21. These sort of outlined as to how the various departments will assist in us dealing with the sudden sort of financial challenges that we have. And it was stated that there is certainly a risk to service delivery in terms of the reduction of the various baseline sort of expenditure of the various departments that are being affected. I would like to know, Chairperson, in terms of the reduction in the baselines of the various departments as stated here, what were the consultation with those departments? Were they, because at the end of the day, there's a risk for service delivery, and the department certainly will bear the brunt of not fulfilling that sort of service delivery sort of targets that they have for themselves, and what would the degree of consultation that existed with those departments. And then lastly, Chairperson, for now, is that we have now, based on the fiscal consolidation plan that was presented to us, we have witnessed the destructive sort of effects of centralized bargaining, whereby wage negotiations were agreed upon on a centralized basis, regardless of the impact it will have on the decentralized structures that are being affected by. And we see it not only within this sector that we operate in, but we see it in various kind of centralized bargaining forums that exist within the country. So when we dealt with the main budget in earlier this year, at that stage, what was contained in the presentation was a 3% increase in the cost of employment, because that was the top. And we sort of anticipated, given the history of centralized bargaining sort of engagements, that and the strike that was sort of at play at the time, that obviously maybe they will settle for higher. We didn't anticipate 7.5%, which is enormous. And the question to the Treasury, because there was uncertainty at that stage in terms of who would fund a higher settlement, and it was expected that a national government would do that. And obviously, it's clear that they did not. And what we are saddled with now is that the majority of the departments that didn't benefit from this sort of 1.7 billion rand have to fund the increase in COE 100%. And that is completely unacceptable, Chairperson. So, given that, over the medium term, as was presented in April, what would the impact be on wage progression? Because we have now this higher settlement in theory, the wage progression over time are going to be based on the higher sort of baselines that other than the ones that were presented in April to us. So have we sort of considered in terms of the over 6 billion rand that's, you know, be a shortfall over the medium term, whether we have factored in that particular sort of impact on wage progression over the medium term? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Member Mbimbi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I will try to ask most of my questions on the first round. If there's going to be, I will just deal with follow-ups. I will ask both on the speech of the minister as well as on the presentation as well. Now, I think even in the presentation, Honorable Minister, it was indicated that the budget process takes 3 phases. I think you've mentioned that in the speech as well, kind of briefly outline it, and I think in the presentation as well. I just want to check in those phases, at what stage have we, I know it's a question I always ask every time, at what stage do we involve the public? Has there been any form of public participation in those 3 phases? Or is it still just a bureaucratic process where you just consult with departments and the public is not really involved in the drafting or the drawing of the budget of the provincial government, which is something different to where you have in local government, you know, they will go even ward by ward and all those things. So any form of stakeholders that are being engaged in putting up the budget in some of those phases or in all those phases. Now, obviously, it's always good to create more jobs, you know, as this is, I think we've even got the slogan for jobs for growth for jobs or jobs for growth. Now, I think the minister mentioned that is setting up a map to achieve 1 trillion jobs with some of the risks that you've also mentioned yourself right through your speech, and I think even here, will that be possible to achieve? I know there seems, because there's been a lot of risk that has been made, but I know obviously the speech it's a political statement, but it's also good sometimes some of the statement we can have some form of fact as well. For example, in page 5, you will say that so encouraged by the progress with jobs and in the face of challenges and grave uncertainty because of national failings. Now, it will be good sometimes to say, look, the national government is failing on these things, because now it's just general, it's just left there hanging. Everybody say, no, national is failing, but you don't say on what. It might be good to say, what are these things? Otherwise, they just remain as generalization, and therefore they can be dismissed as such. But in spite of, on page 11, on number 7, on provincial reserve, I've seen even in the presentation, it's mentioned the issue of reserves. Don't you think, in spite of all these risks we are having, can we use our reserves to mitigate some of these risks? You know, or is it I would say, accounting of financial way of speaking as financial people, you know, they always see risks sometimes, even if there are no risk, even if some of the risk can be mitigated. Now, if we've got reserves, do we have to be worried or concerned about the risks? Now, obviously, this takes me to some of the issues raised in the presentation. I think it's just going to be 2 or 3 of those that I've marked. For example, on page 20 of the presentation, it's the allocation from provincial fiscus is 300 million. Is this some of the money? Are we using some of our reserves to mitigate or to as a source of funding as well? I'm just curious on that. On page 21, on the I see there on all the votes, when it comes funding for wage agreement on education, health and wellness, social development, it's blank. There, I see there is no figures that I've mentioned. Maybe what might be the reasons for that? I should take that on page 25 on adjustment. Part of the issue that was, I think, raised even in the minister's speech, that the National Disaster Fund has been depleted, according to the speech. Now, are you, in spite of those challenges, does that mean that in the Western Cape, then, if there's a disaster, are we not going to come in? Does again raise the issue of our reserves. At what stage are we not going to be able to use our reserves to mitigate our disaster challenges? Because I believe that's where, as I'm rounding up, then second last question, Chairperson, I think, and on the page 27, man, I know it's also something I always raise on the economic overview, slow growth, and page 27 of the slide, the comparison there on the macroeconomic projections, that table there, you always compare us with the superpowers, and we don't feature any in that league. Can I request in future, when you do some of this comparison, just compare us also with Africa? How do we relate to Africa? And also, how do we relate to the SADC region? Because I think if you look at the GDP of those superpowers, it's I think it becomes an unfair comparison. They are called first world countries. So we are a developing country. So is there no way in future just do a fair comparison? Otherwise, we are comparing apples with pears, So that's just my request. I know it's something I've been requesting in the past. If you may please just do Africa and also do SADC as well, so that we can know how do we fare. Or if you compare us with some of the countries that are also the developing world as well. I know we want to achieve eventually what those superpowers are achieving. My last question, Chairperson, because I think the issue of the reserves, I've really elaborated a lot on it. I see on page 36, on the budget policy priorities, of course, the top one is the law enforcement advancement plan and the employment of LEAP officers. I think that's about that. And obviously, I think about 4 years ago, when the Premier, in his first speech in the House, pronounced the safety plan and was going to employ thousands of these law enforcement officers. So how many have we employed so far? Can we get an indication of how far are we from achieving that 1,000 mark? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Member Mvimbi. And just for Treasury, Member Mvimbi also referred to page 11 of the growth for jobs policy. And in terms of GDPs of other countries that is not mentioned in the current budget, that is page 4 of the Provincial Economic Review and Outlook. We're going to the next person now, Member Mkondlo.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentations. Chair, I would really request, perhaps maybe it's because it's actually the last budget discussion we may have, or budget adjustment in this administration, that this type of presenting is highly overwhelming. Too much information at the same time, it doesn't help us. And I think we should be very consistent, because this is one issue we raise every time, in particular with national, when we as the province are getting information at very short notice that is too much that we need to process, so that we give due regard to the responsibility that we have. So I would like to request that, as the chair of the committee, you help us into the future, that we either stick to what we know best. If there's going to be changes in how we present, at least that is covered. Because I'm sitting with too many books now in front of me that I have to juggle with. So I may not necessarily have the kind of skill. And actually, due to age, you must also consider that I may not be as fast as possible in reading. So I just wanted to make that, Chair, so that this is not just a session, because I think we have spent almost an hour listening to the department presenting. And I think it's something that we need to guard against, because this is supposed to be a discussion with ourselves. So we need to also be given an opportunity to engage, so that we understand better where the department is coming with the particular approach that they would have chosen to come and present to us. The first question I have is on page 6, to just explain when the colleagues are talking about positive signs that continue, and under safety, one may read literally under safety to say increase in violent crime, homicides in the Western Cape increasing by 14. So I'm trying to understand, how is this a positive sign? So if maybe that could be contextualized better, so that I can hear it much better in my ears. And then the second one, Chair, because I'm going to try, got a couple of questions, and my apologies, I will have to leave, because at 2 o'clock I must join the National on the AGOA, which has been also another sort of pet project or interest of this provincial government. So as the member of the Standing Committee on Economic Affairs, I'm going to have to jet out. The other issue I just wanted to understand, Minister, in your speech, and I'm going to bring the book as part of this, in page 5, I think there is where you speak about the quarterly labor force survey and the jobs that this province has been able to increase. And I think recently, a few days ago, we were here discussing the municipal economic review outlook. And one of the things, I think, in the book on the medium-term budget policy statement in page 18, which actually looks at growth in the labor force, employment and unemployment in the Western Cape. If you do have that book, if you consider where we are in Q3 in 2023, and you look at that, the job recovery, and you would see that even in Q3 of 2019, we are still faring almost there, a bit below than that. And I think this is a very interesting, if you look at it, and I'm saying year on year, you looking at the same quarter. If you look at that particular graph, where I think the unemployment there, if you look at those graphs, I think around 20%, I think in 2023. Why I'm raising this, Minister, I think it was very interesting in the Mero presentation to look at employment, but also to look at the unemployment, but also the net job losses. And I'm raising this because I think the increase in jobs is a commendable development. Very important, because in the current state of affairs, where we look at where we are, I think that becomes important. But for me, where we would have to do the job in terms of all this data, because as you said, we are data-led, that I think it's important to find out year-on-year difference that we're making, but also we look at, you know, when one checks in the same book, I think in page 11, page 11 actually demonstrates that where we are able to make a job increase, particularly are those that have got secondary and tertiary. I think that page 11 actually provides the percentages and indicates that the people that are not necessarily being absorbed by our labor market are those that are less than secondary. They are sitting at about 38.7%. So I think for me, what becomes important in the discussion of G for jobs, growth for jobs, actually is how we are having deliberate programs that are dealing with those that are affected. And those that are affected, once again, if you look in this particular data, you would see here you have youth unemployment, where 37.3% are Africans, 23.1% of the youth unemployment is colored youth. And this is important for me because when we raise these issues about equity issues in the province, we're not raising them because we're trying to be racist or trying to racialize, you know, our arguments, but it's because of the data that is telling, and because we're using data, and data must be able to assist. So I just wanted to raise that I'm hoping in the G4J going forward, that I think the issue that was raised about trying to meet, I think, more than 100,000 net job losses from the 2019 to date, you know, is something that we're able to focus on. And then further than that, I'm interested in this. There is this discussion about the wage bill. And Minister, I think you made an indication in page 23 that there is an intergovernmental dispute that is being lodged. Now, my question is, who is lodging the dispute? If you can be specific, has it been lodged by your department, by the Premier's department? Can you provide us what has been the submission made by the department? And I'm actually interested to understand that what are the discussions that the Provincial Treasury is having with labor in the province, so that as you engage about the extreme, what you view as extreme wage negotiations, you take into cognizance also what are the views of the employees of the Western Cape provincial government. So is that conversation taking place with the labor in the province? And if so, can you share what are those conversations that you are having on your side? My last one on this round, Chair, is on page 22 in terms of the infrastructure, and I think it's also indicated in the presentation where it is mentioned that I think some of the challenges and also the reductions that will then see a decrease, if I heard well, in new assets. And I'm interested to maybe get more detail. When you say there will be a decrease in new assets, what does that mean in detail? Does it refer to schools? Does it refer to, if you can at least just give that particular indication? And I think here, one of the things that is not being mentioned from where I'm sitting is the impact also financially of the crime, construction mafia, and extortion to the efforts of crime. And I'm not understanding why it is not gaining the same traction of other issues that you seem to be raising very high, like the wage bill, like any other thing. Why is this particular issue that is actually here in this particular province, the notion of construction mafia, which obviously is not unique here in the province. It happens in Gauteng, it happens in the KZN, especially more urban kind of provinces. So I'm interested whether that is not an issue in as far as our infrastructure spending is concerned. Let me stop there for now, Chair.
Thank you so much. And just for clarification regarding money bills in the provinces, the manner that we process it is in terms of Rule 188, subsection 2 of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament rules, read in line with section 214, subsection 1 of the Constitution, read in terms of section 12, subsection 4 of the National Money Bills and Related Monies Act, Matters Act 2009, Act 9 of 2009, read in line with section 30, subsection 2 of the PFMA, specifically subsection A, B, E, and G as per National Treasury presentation on the Division of Revenue on slide 3 as previously presented. So we do need to deal with those respective adjustments within the provincial adjustment. I'm going to get to you because we need to deal with the public participation separately. Do you understand? I'm going to get back to your question. So I have noted you. I'm just going to get back to your question once all the members' questions have been answered. Okay, I hope that clarifies. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Minister and HOD, you can allocate the questions accordingly.
Yeah, I'll give it the first go. So first, just to explain the numbers in respect of Honourable Dugmore's question. So the 1.4 billion is a gross addition. And the table that explains all of that is on slide. What's it now? Should I find it now? We'll find it now. Yes. So the 1.4 billion is the gross addition, but then you gain and then we lose on conditional grants. Then there's reallocations. And so in the end, although we've allocated to those different areas, at the end of the day, it comes out at 1.4 billion. Sorry, let me just find you the table. Sorry, so the 1.4 is the net addition. Slide 20, right, thank you. I knew it was in there somewhere. So then it breaks down the different allocations, which would then explain the net addition with all the other moving parts that kind of come in and out of the budget. In respect of the 64 million for the municipal energy resilience, I mean, we don't have the breakdown on hand, but my understanding is that that expenditure is for or is intended for hardware. Then on, yes. I don't have the full breakdown, but my understanding is that the vast majority of the funding is for hardware. But we'd be able to provide a breakdown in due course if the honourable member would like that kind of information on how that expenditure is broken down. Then I'll pass the questions in respect of COE and Department of Infrastructure with the 441 million, as well as collection of revenue.
Thank you, Minister. Chair, members, the team is ready. So, but I'm going to just start with Member America's question. Maybe just a little bit of background. With Refresh, human settlement became part of infrastructure, and then the mobility parts that was part of your original Volten then became the Department of Mobility. But within that arrangement, everybody that was within the Program 1 function became part of this management arrangement. So the personnel numbers that you see being shifted or moved from a zero base would be line personnel, and for the time being, the administrative staff were held in this management arrangement. So those are the movement in terms of the actual number of people in the system. Just to also touch on whether there was a consultation with departments in terms of consolidation, I think at various levels, even before we got to the MTech, we started off in phase 1 when we could see that there is potential risk during the financial year. So we started off by communicating in our very first circular to departments that we don't know what we exactly facing, but in order to prepare, we were asking departments to prepare according to various scenarios that we thought would be able to assist us in responding to what might be coming our way. So from the very beginning, Budget Circular 1, Budget Circular 2, at accounting officers level, at CFO forums, through the MTech process. So there was continuous consultation with departments around the issues around consolidation. I'm going to ask Annalise just to respond to the third question, that is in terms of the what would happen with the wage bill moving forward over the MTF. And then Shirley and Malcolm will expand a bit on the own revenue, but safe to say the numbers that we have, we're fairly certain that those are the numbers that we're looking at. So we don't foresee any in-year risk in terms of our revenue collection and what is currently the projected outcome. But the team will pick up on those. Then I think the question as it relates to page 21, which is on fiscal consolidation and what's happening there with the funding of the wage agreement. This slide simply tries to demonstrate what was taken out of baselines in the form of fiscal consolidation and what was then reallocated. This slide does not deal with the funding that we received from national, partially funding the wage agreement for education and health, but it is already factored in the numbers. So that is why one would not see a specific allocation from fiscal consolidation to those departments as it relates to the wage agreement. There was the issue around law enforcement and how many was employed. It remained 1,000. We did not increase the numbers. And I think Ms. Ishmael is online. So just in terms of if she can just pick up on the question around why necessarily is it a positive when we see an increase in violent crime from a member in Nkondlo. And then there was the IGR dispute. So yeah, so I'm going to hand over to the team just to try and pick up on some of the questions. Annalise? Yeah, okay. Oh, sorry.
Like to Member America's question is on the wage agreement, and it was in asking in terms of what have we factored over the medium term in terms of now we know in the current financial year in terms of the outcome of the wage agreement and the funding, partly funding we received from national. So overall, we have factored that into our communication with departments in terms of the outcome of this preliminary framework. So what departments need to do is the fact that they need to absorb the wage agreement within their reduced baselines. So firstly, Because of fiscal consolidation that we spoke about, we indicated that that needs to reduce baselines. And then within those reduced baselines, departments would now need to also absorb the wage agreement funding that we did not receive. So that's why we indicated phase 3 then becomes, in terms of a risk-led conversation with departments on what is that impact on service delivery when they do that kind of sustainability. Can do the further things that I think it's meant for perhaps on my side of the presentation. So just the question then in terms of slide 21. Remember me, and you say in terms of why is it blank in terms of slide 21, and that's that fiscal consolidation slide. So in order to understand the wage agreement, and so we indicated that there's a 1.1 billion rand shortfall. So that 1.1 billion rand shortfall is made up of a shortfall for education of 520 million rand. So even though they receive 943 million from the national fiscus, as we indicated as partial, there's still a 520 million rand shortfall within their base. Same thing for health. Health has a 319 million rand shortfall still on the wage in the current financial year. The other departments, they make up in terms of what that shortfall is, because we receive no funding for those other departments. So what this slide then indicates here is that how we funded, first of all, those other departments, the non-health and education departments. And what we were able then to fund is 243 million rand towards that for the wage agreement. So you see then the funding of the wage agreement is this blank then for the social sector, because there's still a shortfall. So what we then did, we identified money. They indicated it's still risk and there's a shortfall. So we funded that funding back to them. And therefore, there's nothing for the social sector, because it's more, they need more money than what we could even give them. So that's why it's blank from that perspective. Then in terms of the reserves, yes. So also in terms of the adjustments budget, and I think the reserves was also based on the the 2024 MTF on reserves. So firstly, in terms of when we put the 2023 main budget together, our main reserves that we put together is unforeseen and unavoidable. Now, in generally unforeseen and unavoidable in terms of how we, in practice, how we've accessed that reserve is mainly through disasters that we've accessed in terms of, and then also in terms of what is not known when you put the funding together in terms of from a budget perspective. So the wage agreement was known. Only the funding of it was not known. And so that's one of the reasons why we did not access the unforeseen and unavoidable, because we did know about the wage negotiations when we put the budget together. And nationally, no one funded the wage agreement as indicated by the national minister when he tabled the budget. So that in terms of, we do have in terms of practices in terms of when we access. So in the adjustments budget, what we have done, we've accessed then you quite rightly pointed out to us unforeseen and unavoidable to 22 million. So that 22 million then is made up of 17 million for the Microsoft licenses, as we indicate the exchange rate. When we budgeted in the 23 in the main budget, we budgeted at 17 rand to the dollar for the exchange rate for Microsoft licenses. That's an average. It is not absolute. And so what we obviously did not know was that the exchange rate was going to increase to 18 and 19 rand to the dollar from that perspective. So it's way above the average at which we budgeted. And so therefore we accessed of the 22 million, 17 million in this financial year. 5 million then of the 22 million, what is left over, is going for agriculture, and that is for the flood damage. I indicated that we are accessing more funding in the unforeseen and unavoidable in the current financial year for agriculture. to the value of 43 million, and then also in terms of Department of Infrastructure for roads for 150 million. But that is only allocated in 24-25 because of the lead and planning time that is required. So infrastructure, for example, in terms of responding now to floods, they have this phrase in terms of build back better. And one of the reasons for that requires then in terms of more intense planning, and to make sure that we also become climate resilient in our responses where flood damage is concerned. So that's why the lead time is required, and therefore you don't see it in this adjustments budget. You'll see it then in allocations for 24-25 regarding both infrastructure and agriculture. Lastly, and unforeseen and unavoidable, we then indicated in 2023, we put the stabilization reserve in place when we put the 2023 budget together. That was on average about 400 to 450 million rand per annum over the MTF. When we then indicated, so as it says, stabilization reserve, now in terms of that, we were now posed with the fiscal consolidation. It obviously means that there's destabilization within baselines of department. So we accessed that stabilization reserve. So we did access our reserve regarding in terms of 23-24. What then remains is what we then indicate to you on slide, to the committee, we indicated it on slide, apologies, slide 32, that's what's remaining. It's unforeseen and unavoidable, as I indicated, what we use that funding for in practice. And we must also remember, I mean, usually we say we're going to fire season, but I think what we now realize in the Western Cape, we're almost in disaster season. So we can expect one day of fire, the next day we have in terms of intense rain, which then impacts in terms of our infrastructure. So that's one of the reasons for the current financial year, for the remaining part of this financial year, we have not accessed the full amount for unforeseen and unavoidable because we feel that's prudent that we need to have some left over in the current financial year. But we do indicate what is left over over the MTF, as I said, mainly for disasters.
Then just to respond to some of the other questions on public participation. So we are engaging with municipalities. In fact, we'll be engaging with them on Friday in the Provincial Budget and Governance Forum. The messages for Murray will now kick off in respect of the main budget for next year. And also, this is a money bill. It has its own public participation process as set out in legislation, which I think the Chair alluded to. For Growth for Jobs, our goal of achieving R1 trillion economy by 2035 means that we have a longer term view of how we achieve higher growth rates. And given the fiscal situation that we're in, achieving these goals is now more urgent and more necessary than ever, because only through economic growth can we then increase revenue and then start to get out of the conundrum that we find ourselves in. The question on reserves, I think, has been adequately answered. Then there was a question on the quarterly labour force survey. And so, I mean, here one can just see that our population is growing as fast as we're creating jobs. And that's something that G4J does in fact respond to, is that we can grow at much higher levels to increase employment much quicker. In addition, the skills development and skills levels based on unemployment is definitely something that is contemplated in the Growth for Jobs strategy. It falls under PFA number 7, which is skills and employability, and in fact is our most significant chapter in the strategy because we understand how important this is. In respect of the intergovernmental dispute, it has been lodged by the provincial government, by the Premier and myself. And that was lodged yesterday, and we now hope to have engagement with national government on our deep concerns that we have. Yes, I think those were my questions. We could ask Ms. Ishmael.
And Shirley is going to cover.
Thank you.
Okay,
I will do so. Okay, thank you, Acting HED. Thank you, Minister. So the question on the crime. or safety. The slide actually on slide 6 actually referred to some positive signs continue, and that's in particular in jobs, however, not in safety. So, however, what we can say that there are our Western Cape government is really focusing on safety, and as you know, we have the safety plan. And more so, when we actually did, we work on our service delivery index, and we actually asked the citizens also, what are your top 10 priorities that you believe the Western Cape government should focus on? And then the crime was one of the, was actually the third top priority that the citizen felt that the Western Cape government should actually focus on, and we are. But having said that, if one look at safety as per slide 6, and we want to look at the increase, then it could be multiple factors that actually bring increase the statistics. It could be socioeconomic vulnerabilities, it could be substance abuse, it could be alcohol abuse, and it could be domestic violence, and there are multiple factors. So much so, the question is also then, it is and looking at the budget also, the impact even on the impact of violence on the education sector, or even on the health sector. Therefore, as you know, we do now have a violence prevention unit also in the Department of Health. Thank you. I hope that answered the question. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Chair. The last question on own revenue. I think, members, one of the aspects you can see in this fiscal consolidation is considerable pressure on departments' expenditure. So as we move into that, there's a lot more effort on collecting their own revenues. And in this respect, the start of the own revenue budget is very much a conservative. So you shape your cloth conservatively so that you make sure that you're able to collect that. The collections are particularly in respect of from health on hospital patient fees, and also from the Department of Infrastructure, mainly in relation to over-collection on leases. I'm going to hand over, though, to Malcolm Boyson, whose team on the fiscal policy, and make sure that we engage with departments on an ongoing basis to really push the envelope, get them to extend their efforts on revenue collections where they are able to in this environment of fiscal consolidation. Over to you, Malcolm.
Thank you, Shirley. I think just to add to that, the numbers in terms of the over collections, those are most like guaranteed and as stable, as Shirley has indicated, that we're moving from a low base. I think it's also an attempt to incentivize departments to improve their own revenue collections to make sure that the expenditure matches the revenue. Thank you.
Chair, the last one on my side was in terms of the question around the decrease in terms of new infrastructure that was asked. And so the decrease we see is in education. And as I indicated in the presentation, the detail can be found in terms of the we refer to it in terms of the OPMI, the overview of adjusted provincial and municipal infrastructure. And what we do is we actually provide the detail on actually which projects that reductions actually happen. So that is page 42, 43, and 44 of the book. Just in terms of what kind of projects, then they are mainly in terms of schools and classrooms. And in terms of the reduction, the reduction is mainly in terms of projects that's in design, pre-feasibility, and in planning phase. So that's in terms of where the reductions mainly has occurred.
Thank you. I think I'm lucky enough to have brought my previous quarter documentation with me just to check that what you are saying is what you said previously. And Ms. Robinson and Ms. Cantana did indicate on the 21st of September 2023 that they don't have the answer yet from National Treasury, but we are preparing to absorb regarding the public wages. I've checked the numbers on slide 8 of the previous quarter with this slide. Let me just make sure I get my numbers correctly now for the record. Slide 11, and they are exactly the same. The only difference is a little bit under compensation of employees, which more or less does amount to 3 billion rand, which brings us to a total, I think, a difference of minus 100 million, more or less, based on the two differences in the slides. But the respective information was indicated for the first quarter on the 21st of September as well. I'm now going to do the public participation question because we are at 2:15 and we still need to deal with the final mandate on the division of revenue because we need to submit our mandate to the National Council of Provinces. And Honorable Munyal did have his hand up.
Oh,
Do you want to do follow-ups? Okay, then let me quickly deal with the follow-ups from the members. Member Kalma, can I just ask, is that a new question or a follow-up? Because this budget with the respective adjustments are also after this meeting going to be referred per vote to the respective committees for interrogation as well. So I just want to check quickly, new or follow-up? Is it a follow-up? Okay, I'm going to check if it's a follow-up because I did write all the questions down as well. Member Mvimbi, Member Nkama, and then Member Honorable Munyai.
Yes, it's gonna be one short one, of course, related to reserves. I just want to check on the cost of employees. How much of that has been sent back to reserves? Did you send any money on cost of employees, COEs, back to the reserves? That's just my COEs. Is there any COEs amount that has been sent back to the reserves that could not be used? No. Okay.
thank you. Okay. You are taking honorable member. Oh, sorry.
No, thank you very much, Chair. And it's definitely a follow-up around page 6 and the issue of safety. I think I nearly asked this question to the Premier last week and could not. I really want to understand the logic behind our budgeting decisions around this issue of safety. Because if you look at the department as a whole, the community safety and police oversight, close to 50% of their budget goes to the LEAP. And in that LEAP, I was listening attentively and interested in the response when there was a question around the numbers. There we have an issue already within the LEAP program, where we're now seemingly becoming a testing ground for LEAP officers. Community safety pays to train people to become a LEAP officer, but the next months they are going out while losing them in the service of LEAP. They go to other entities of the city because maybe they have better salaries or something like that, which is traffic and all other. So is this really value for money in line with what is the targets? Because evidence crime is increasing, and interestingly, I think Miss Ishmael makes the point that we have been making, that is it value for money to keep on paying for these 1,000 LEAP officers, 50% of the budget of police oversight and community safety, to a LEAP program through the city, than redirecting the funds to concentrate on the issues she was talking about, which she says are the contributing factors in terms of crime. So I really want to understand that really under these difficult fiscal situation that we find ourselves. That do we see value for money in this leap? Even the leap stations, is it really? We make that assessment as we budget and try to shift monies around and make these budgetary decisions. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Member Kama. I'm going to take Member Munyais at the same time, but members, please, we are now bordering on leaving the Budget Committee mandate to other committee mandates also now, but I'm going to leave it up to the Minister and HOD to assist you, to Member Kama.
May I
Member
proceed?
Munyai? Yes.
Thank you very much indeed, esteemed Honorable Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee or Select Committee. Esteemed the Honorable Minister, Senior Management and Honorable Members. Firstly, I see that for the budget that has been tabled, there will be no funding for the financial year 2023 wage agreement consideration. You don't expect any other, labor demands on the high rising of wage. I'm just, I'm raising this in the context of this declaration. I think I agree that the current situation in the country, we're facing the energy crisis, economic crisis to some degree, unemployment crisis, and I know your view throughout, even reference to the Gini coefficient with regard to the people of Karoo over 0.5 or something. You are putting up a trend that in Western Cape there's no crisis of unemployment. I would appreciate to get your view. I'm raising this, honorable members, because we're here to learn from the Western Cape in various aspects. And I agree with the issues of the COVID-19. I agree with the view that COVID-19 has brought the unprecedented consequences and also, disrupted, because it brought equilibrium, so it disrupted the global supply chain. And that includes also impact on South Africa in general, but also other countries in the Western Cape. Given that you are also the base of, you have the port and trade and all these things, that would be one of the issues. That on disruption of the global supply chain, I would agree, because some countries where they produce some of the issues you may demand, product that you may demand, that could not happen because of such a disruption, factories non-operational and so on. I think with respect to, is it page 9 somewhere around, you were indicating that, it's referring to the speech, sorry, of the minister, honorable minister. I think there was reference to the district also showing an impressive growth of international visitors, with about over 193% increase of the international bed nights. I'm not sure whether you're aware that the Public Works, National Public Works, has given the Western Cape a land to expand the airport to have more lanes, not just one runway, two more than runways, that is similarly to OR Tambo, to allow most of the flight to Eastern Cape. As you know, most of the major flights, they are inbound to Western Cape. So I think if the provincial government can just engage with the AXA on the Western Cape, but to make sure that that project proceed in the interests of the international tourism. It's just a comment, I'm sure. What is the issues of inequality in Western Cape? In historically, the President Mbeki once said, raise issues of the two economies. When you go to Centel, it's another type of reflection. You go to Alexander, something else. What is this experience of the Western Cape? I worked in Cape Town for 4 years, more than 4 years, here in Parliament. When I was driving there, I was going to, it's a hot bay. On the other hand, then there's informal settlement. And when I was driving from one of these parliamentary residents, I passed, what is this, Langa, what were these communities, I'm saying, what is the plan in the context of the budget of the minister to address those issues that they see? And I know I've been even to Elisha, is a clinic or hospital where when Bill Gates visited that clinic, and the intervention of the doctors, what they do with respect trying to respond to HIV and AIDS, and also a contribution from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The point I'm trying to raise is that how does Western Cape government, provincial government, in the context of the budget, respond to this, neighboring area where there's a lot of poor communities? I would say I've been to the Cape Flats, a number of areas. I know these areas because I traveled almost every square meters of the Cape. So how does the budget respond to those challenges? Thank you very much. I'm raising these issues to, I'm sure, honorable members, to draw some lessons on the intervention of the Western Cape, the response of unemployment, which we have seen positive results of employment has been shared with us. Thank you.
No problem. I also have 2 Wasimas in my life. I've Wasima in budget and I've Wasima in education. There's no 1 Wasima and 2 Wasima, it's just Wasima budget and Wasima education. So I'm also going to ask Budget Wasima to get us some, perhaps some extra provincial economic review and outlook books, as well as some growth for jobs books. I know we have tried to organize some extra budget books for today, if possible, but I'm also going to try and ask with my nice English, I'm going to ask
apologize if I disrupted your,
No, you have not disrupted. No, not with Provincial Parliament, and as per our public hearing processes on legislation, you have asked a question and the minister and the HOD must answer you. And I think just because we're at 25 minutes past 2, I think the extra books also might assist, especially with the week going forward, because there's some other information, for example, on education also in those particular books that also might be interesting to you guys. Minister?
Right. Thanks very much, Chair, and to the honourable members for the questions. I do understand that you're under time constraints, so I'll try my best to answer as quickly as possible. I think Honourable Mvimbi's question was answered. Yep. Then Honourable Kama asks a policy question around LEAP and value for money. So I think, that is a discussion that, would be useful to have in the Community Safety Standing Committee taking place over the next few days. But, the indications from, independent bodies like the Institute for Security Studies will show that between 2017 and 2022, there really have been gains in the Western Cape's per capita murder rate. And so this would indicate the LEAP program is working, and that is why we continue to put money behind it. To the honourable colleague from the Gauteng Provincial Legislature, thank you for your comments. Maybe Trey would just answer the question on the wage increases and how we've contemplated that. On unemployment, our unemployment rate at the moment is 20.2%. And in Q3, we saw between Q3 of 2022 and Q3 of 2023, we saw 300,000 new jobs added to the provincial tally, which means that we now have the lowest unemployment rate the lowest expanded unemployment rate, but we also have the highest absorption rate and the highest labour force participation rate. That being said, 20.2% is still extremely high, and why we've developed an economic growth strategy to make sure that our economy can grow faster so that more jobs can be created and that we keep up with population demands. Because at the slow rates of growth, we don't create enough employment to make sure that everyone has access to work and to a job. And we know that jobs bring dignity, and that is our intention. So our plan by 2035 is to be growing at between 4 and 6% in real terms, which translates then into R1 trillion provincial economy. And our indications show that if we can get that right, we will add 600,000 jobs, new jobs to the economy, which will then really start to put a dent in our unemployment rate. On the COVID-19, I mean, undoubtedly it had major disruptions on supply chain, global supply chains, but this is only exacerbated by inefficiencies in our ports. So the Port of Cape Town, which is a container terminal, is performing below its own targets. 55% of South Africa's agricultural exports come from the Western Cape, and therefore the containerized cargo is extremely important for our economy. And unfortunately, it is a binding constraint on our economy, the fact that the port is not working like it should be working. So we're doing a lot of work in that respect. Our indications show that if we can increase our exports by 10% by 2026, which we can do, that will increase our GDP by almost 1%, and it will add several billion rands in tax revenue as well. So it's a win-win, and that's why we have to get the port working again. I'm so glad you mentioned tourism, because it's something that's very close to my heart. We're very happy to see that tourism has not only recovered post-COVID-19, but we are growing compared to 2019 levels. The Western Cape really, tourism industry has really been so resilient. And this summer season, we're expecting a 25% increase in the number of tourists based on last year. And for the first time, we will breach 1 million inbound seats. So that's all good news. But of course, in order to grow it any further, because the airport is now at capacity, we do need the runway refurbishment. And that's something that we've been asking for many years now. In fact, during COVID, Premier was urging AXA to do the build because flights were not coming in. It would have been much easier to build during the COVID era. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and now we're at capacity, and now we're starting to feel pressure at the airport, and that runway really does need to be built now. So we do engage with AXA regularly, and we are waiting for the announcement of the expansion of the airport, which we don't know where it is or when it will come, you know, and when those permissions and so on will finally be granted, because it is critical in order for the tourism industry to be able to grow and create jobs. So we know that, I hope I'm getting my statistics right now, but for every 100 international visitors, 2 new jobs are created. And so that's why tourism is so important to our economy. Then on inequality, we last week published the Municipal Economic Review and Outlook, or the MERO. Perhaps copy, or the QR code could be provided to the honourable members, because we have a QR code which will take you then to a booklet for each of our districts. Now, in the districts, in terms of inequality, we look at 2 factors. The one is the Human Development Index, and the other is the Gini coefficient. So if we look at the Gini coefficient, income inequality in the Cape Metro, measured by the Gini coefficient, is on par with the province at 0.601 in 2022, which is better than that of South Africa, which sits at 0.618, indicating that there's less inequality in the Western Cape than the country as a whole. And if we look at longer term trends, it's encouraging to see that the Gini coefficient declined in the Cape Metro area and in the province between 2019 and 2022. And if we look at the Human Development Index, which measures health, education, and the standard of living, in the Cape Metro at 0.734 exceeds that of the province at 0.722, and the rest of the country at 0.654, indicating that residents are in fact better off in the Cape Metro area. We then got breakdowns by each of the districts. I'm not going to go into that detail now, but it is all there, and we're very happy to share that information with you, Honourable Member. I think just the wage question.
Thank you, Minister, through you, Chair. Just at the time that the budget was finalized, there was no funding. We didn't have an idea of what the implications would be of that wage agreement. So there was no funding also provided for any changes in the conditions of COLA. But that does not mean that we did not incur the expenditure, and it also had then meant that we had to make provision for it, because when the wage agreement became clear, the funding was partially done by National for only education and health. So on slide 21 of the presentation, we're indicating how we had to respond to that liability per vote. So there is provision now in the budget for the wage agreement.
Thank you. And that's not just the Western Cape, that's all the respective provinces in terms of the public wages being centrally agreed. So if you don't get all the money, you must go find it somewhere else. And that's, the budget cuts and so on. Colleagues, I'm going to conclude the public hearing part of this then. And Ms. Kamish Ahmed, you just need to assist me with how I refer this now again to committees, which rule that is, or which manner.
It's just the speaker before all those.
Okay. Ms. Kamish Ahmed has indicated to me in her fancy English that the speaker will assist me with referral to the respective votes, but just for formalization, the budget has been tabled and it will go to the respective committees for votes. I ask for those who might still have us on radio in the background, please members attend your budget votes, read the respective votes, consult your respective colleagues, ask the respective departments regarding the impact on your committee that you sit on. And then after the votes, those particular recommendations, support, not support, and so forth, will be referred back to Budget Committee on Friday for our mandate on the bill as per normal legislation in this regard. But for the Minister and to the Provincial Treasury, I think especially for the permanent members, a lot of what was said today isn't new news. It's things we've either expected or that we've been talking about for a very, very long time. And I cannot imagine the difficulty it must have been to go to HODs, to departments, to program managers and say, we don't have extra money for this public wages, so you need to now assist us in finding it. And we need to find it within our budget. And that could not have been easy. I just want to take my hat off to you and thank you all for the hard work that you've put in to make sure that we can keep the provincial budget stable over the MTEF period. With that, I will now excuse you for your other day-to-day activities to go keep the provincial treasury stable. Please go lock up that safe. We will now continue with the Division of Revenue Amendment Bill in this regard. And I please just remind the permanent members at the very least to please stay on. I know Member Fry is standing in for Member Murray as she had to attend the AGOA session. Thank you so much. Colleagues, in the meantime, I'm just going to ask Ms. Kamish Ahmed to pull up the responses from National Treasury on our negotiating mandate. She has sent it to everyone as well. So you will have it online if you haven't printed it for yourself. And then I'm just going to read through what we've received back. I think this is the first year actually that National Treasury has responded to us. And I was watching the NCP meeting yesterday on YouTube. And I just want to say thank you to one of the members on the committee, Member Billy Okamp, who actually asked that all provinces' reports get read into to the record and make sure that we are able to deal with these matters in the negotiating mandate. So I was very grateful for that. Ms. Kamish, okay, just looking for it. Okay. Okay, colleagues, so I'm just going to go through the responses then from National Treasury. I just want to confirm quickly, the bold is what we sent in and the non-bold is what we got back.
The bold is what we sent in. Yes.
And the non-bold is what we got back. Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm going to start on page 13 because that's where the word Western Cape starts. The rest of the pages are the responses to the other provinces. Okay, but it is available for members to obviously read. Okay, so page 13, that was our request that the 1.7 billion rand increase in the Western Cape PES allocation is not sufficient to cover the cost of the centrally agreed public sector wage increase for the province by the national government, which amounts to 2.9 billion. Service delivery is being crowded out by the public wage increase, which means that the provincial government will have to cut frontline services to cover the shortfall of the centrally agreed increase. It is recommended that the national government must fully fund the public sector wage increase agreement in the current bill for all provinces. By not fully funding the public sector wage increase agreement for all provinces, the national government is forcing provincial governments to cut provincial budgets in order to fund the shortfall for the centrally agreed public sector wage increase agreement. The response we received was the National Treasury acknowledges the concerns raised by the committee and we understand the challenges faced by the province. However, it is crucial to note that we need to balance compensation demands with the broader needs of society and the economy. Due to the current constrained fiscal environment, we have tried to be strategic in making additional allocations for the implementation of the 2023 wage agreement. These allocations were specifically targeted at personnel-heavy departments with the aim of mitigating the possible impact on frontline services. For the provincial government, the allocations were focused on the health and education sectors, which are among the sectors that contribute the most to frontline services. While it is possible that these allocations will not cover the total cost of the wage agreement, we anticipate that they will help provinces reduce the impact of resource reductions on frontline services. So that is the reference to the 1.7 we got for education and health then, that is being funded 78%. The next one relates to cuts to conditional grants for provincial and local governments that we said were excessive and damaging to the service delivery capabilities of these governments. We then recommended that conditional grants are not cut in year and that National Treasury should instead source these funds from national government budget instead of cutting local government and provincial government budgets. We then recommended not to cut the conditional grants to the City of Cape Town, in particular increase the City of Cape Town's urban settlements development grant, informal settlements development grant, and fuel levy allocation. Not cutting conditional grants in year is also in line with public participation comments received in committee, and that then referred to the Children's Commissioner and public participation. Response we got, okay. The current fiscal challenges faced by the country required adjustments to expenditure levels for all government programs, including programs to provinces and municipalities. The reductions were necessary to achieve our targets for fiscal consolidation, and the scale of these reductions required cuts to be made across all government programs. To mitigate the potential impact of these reductions, no in-year reductions were made to the provincial and local government ECDOR share allocations and the sharing of the general fuel levy with metropolitan municipalities. Reductions were, however, made to municipal conditional grants in order to achieve the fiscal consolidation targets, which included the need to reduce conditional grants specifically targeted at metropolitan municipalities, including the City of Cape Town. Colleagues, the reason I'm just reading this is because we wanted them to read, so I'm also reading. It's just fair, okay? The next one, we asked, cut to infrastructure grants such as the education infrastructure grants are especially worrying as infrastructure represents an investment in the future of the province. Infrastructure projects often take place over a number of financial years, with projects needing stability over a number of years to be completed successfully. The cuts to these grants means that there is a risk of some projects that are already in progress not being completed. The long life cycle of infrastructure-related grants must be taken into account. It is recommended that National Treasury do not make any in-year budget cuts to conditional grants affecting infrastructure, as this risks halting projects midway, and that these funds should be sourced from the national government budget instead of cutting local government and provincial government budgets. In particular, given that rights such as the right to basic education, Section 29 of the Constitution, is an immediately realizable right, there is currently no justification for cutting the budgets for education infrastructure grant and the early childhood grant. This is also in line with public participation comments received in the committee. The response we received was: the National Treasury appreciates and acknowledges the concerns raised by the committee, especially with regard to the reductions in the infrastructure conditional grants. We understand the importance of these grants in facilitating critical infrastructure development across the country. As we have previously mentioned, the size and scale of the reductions require that we make tough decisions regarding how these reductions should be effected. In making these decisions, we sought to spare critical programs such as the Provincial Equitable Share and National School Nutrition Grant. Additionally, we made lesser reductions to the programs like the Early Childhood Development Grant. However, this meant that some programs had to bear a greater proportion of the reductions, especially the Education Infrastructure Grant and the School Infrastructure Backlogs Grant. While we recognize the impact these reductions may have on infrastructure projects, as well as the delivery of public services, we must balance these realities with fiscal constraints. The next recommendation we sent in was certain conditional grants have been around for years, with the result that provinces and local government depend on these grants when they set up their budgets and plan their programs for the financial year. It is recommended that the conditional grants directly linked to provincial government mandates should rather be incorporated into the PES formula and form part of the PES division of revenue for provinces. In particular, conditional grants related to education, health, and social sector mandates should not be cut, and this is in line with public participation comments received in committee. The answer we got was this recommendation has been referred to the grant review process, so we're not going to get that answer right now. Okay. Then page 15. We sent in the population data that was used to calculate the PES is outdated, as was confirmed in the latest census data released this year. The Western Cape has moved from the 5th most populated province to the 3rd most populated. The Western Cape also objects to the admission from National Treasury that the newest data will not be used for the next main budget due in February next year. It is recommended that the incorporation of the data, particularly the population statistics, should be incorporated for the main budget for implementation in February 2024. The answer we received was allocation methodologies that use population data to determine allocations will not be updated to use the 2022 census data for the 2024 Division of Revenue Bill. This was agreed to by the Technical Committee of Finance, Technical Budget Forum, Budget Council, and Budget Forum. The reasons for not using the 2022 census in 2024 include the following. The census data was released too late into the budget process, and as such, the data could not be used for the allocation. The 2022 census data is being released in parts, and not all data that is required to make updates to both equitable share formulae is available. Where data is available, it has not yet been disaggregated to a level that is needed to make the updates in the 2024 Division of Revenue. Once all the data has been received, the technical working groups will assess the information, determine the potential impact, and develop proposals on how to manage it. As has been done in the past, phasing in any changes over the course of several years may be necessary to avoid major disruptions to establish baselines. So basically, National Treasury confirms that it's not going to be implemented in Feb next year. Okay. Then we sent in the PES per capita also shows favor towards more rural provinces, and while this is understandable to an extent, it does not differentiate between areas where poorer persons reside and areas which are considered rural in more geographical terms. The majority of poor people rely on government services are based in urban areas, and this current favor does not seem to be properly taken into account in the PES formula. It is thus recommended that this metric is reviewed to instead take into account where the most poor persons in a province reside. The response we received was this recommendation will be considered as part of the ongoing review process. So we're not going to get that answer right now. Okay. Then the next one is in terms of the 1.4 billion rand declared underspending in the local government equitable share. It is recommended to reallocate these back to local governments in South Africa to relieve local municipalities of the impact of budget cuts in the bill. The answer received was monies were set aside for the higher tariff increases approval by NERSA that never realized. The 1.4 was set aside and not allocated in the February 2023 budget, and reverting of these funds will have no negative effect on individual municipalities as it do not impact on the existing allocations. Debt service costs are projected to be higher 2023-2024 by 14.1 billion rand due to combination of the predicted widening of the main budget deficit, higher interest rates, and appreciation of foreign exchange rate. I'm on page 60 now, compared to the 2023 budget. It therefore became necessary for all spheres of government to contribute towards stabilizing the growth in debt. Reallocating the 1.4 billion rand to local government would inevitably result in a cut equivalent to this amount from local government conditional grants. This outcome could have unintended consequences for projects that are in various stages of implementation. So National Treasury used fancy English to say no, okay? Then we sent in line with public participation comments received, is recommended that the budget system, budget process, and budget legislation on both a national and provincial sphere of government is made more child-friendly to understand and engage with, for example, more infographics, TikTok posts, and Instagram reels to explain the respective line items of budgets and implications thereof in simple terms that children would understand. The answer we received was the recommendation is noted. National Treasury conducts a budget outreach program, which is intended to make the budgets as user-friendly as possible. So that is the first one that they were like, okay, cool, let's see. Then the next one, in line with public participation comments received, it is recommended that the National Treasury includes experts in respective sectors to comment on the human rights legal impact of cutting respective conditional grants. Okay, that one wasn't responded to. It was just said recommendation is noted. Not really sure what that means, but okay. Then the next one, it is recommended that National Treasury address this unsustainable budget and fiscal deficits within the MTEF through effective budgeting strategies. And the response was the committee's recommendation is consistent with the existing fiscal strategy outlined in the 2024 MTEF. Throughout this period, government's fiscal strategy aims to rebuild public finances by narrowing the budget deficit and stabilizing debt, while at the same time protecting vulnerable households through safeguarding the social wage. To achieve this, we are pursuing fiscal consolidation through implementing spending reductions, efficiency measures across the government. By stabilizing debt by 2025-26, even at a higher level than initially projected in the 2023 budget, we'll be creating a positive chain reaction on public finances. Such multiplier effects including creating additional fiscal space, providing the government with the necessary room to respond to emerging priorities effectively. Furthermore, to ensure value for money, there will be a comprehensive restructuring of the state over the medium term to enhance efficiency. This restructuring includes implementing the recommendations highlighted in the spending reviews, which may involve actions such as closing or merging underperforming entities. Then the next recommendation we sent on page 17, it is recommended the National Treasury encourages fiscal decentralization to empower provinces and municipalities for more effective service delivery instead of promoting centralized fiscal control. National Treasury responded, the recommendation is noted. National Treasury is on record supporting the devolution of rail, housing, and bus services functions in a responsible and sustainable manner where capacity constraints are considered. We believe that where possible, local governments should have greater fiscal control to better manage the resources available to them and enhance their ability to provide essential services. So that's the second recommendation that National Treasury was like, okay, cool, maybe we can do this. Then the next one that we sent, it is recommended that national government manage the energy crisis effectively at the national level to alleviate budget pressures on provinces and municipalities, allowing them to focus on essential services without seeking alternative funding sources. Our response that we received was we understand the budget pressures on provinces and municipalities to deliver essential services to citizens. Since the 2023 budget, the Integrated National Electrification Program, INEP, grants now fund alternative energy sources, which was welcomed in the sector, given that these grants underspend and the 2022 census showing 94 94.7% access to electricity. However, the fiscus is under pressure, and we support alternative funding sources to find sustainable solutions to the energy crisis. The grant system promotes private sector resources and triple Ps, which has shown success in energy efficiency and demand-side sectors. National Treasury encourages efficient use of funds through grants to support service delivery, innovative solution, and alleviate budget pressures. We value a multifaceted approach with all relevant stakeholders to address the energy crisis holistically while ensuring sound financial management practices. Then we sent in, it is recommended that the national government allow regional autonomy in wage negotiations to prevent disagreements like the Western Cape stance on above inflation wage agreements, ensuring accountability for decisions made at regional levels. And then their response was this recommendation will be referred to the National Department of Public Service and Administration. So they were like, we'll ask them. Okay. The next one, it is recommended that the National Treasury develop a comprehensive plan led by DPSA to downsize the public service as a crucial step in addressing the ongoing fiscal crisis. They then said this recommendation is supported, so that's the third one. It is crucial to ensure that the public service is effective and efficient in providing essential services to citizens while managing costs. To address these challenges, the Presidency, DPSA, and National Treasury, together with other relevant government entities, including the Provincial Treasuries, are currently working on a comprehensive plan led by the DPSA to downsize the public service. More details about this plan are provided in the 2024 budget and the 2024 State of the Nation address. I'm not sure if they meant to tell us that, but okay, it's already a public document. So on page 18, we sent, it is recommended that the national government assess Transnet's borrowing practices to ensure visible improvements align with borrowed funds, particularly in critical sectors like harbors, impacting foreign currency earnings. Sorry, did I say I'm on page 18? Okay. Then the response was this recommendation will be referred to the National Department of Transport, DPE. We then sent, it is recommended that National Treasury create space for increased private sector participation within budgetary allocations, aligning with public announcements to ease fiscal pressures and enhance overall budget efficiency. The response was National Treasury prioritizes public-private partnerships to enhance budget efficiency. We have revised our PPP guidelines, updated the local government borrowing policy framework, and engaged private stakeholders through the Urban Finance Working Group. These initiatives aim to assist municipalities in achieving a sustainable debt regime, developing long-term financial strategies, and exploring possibilities of parallel issuances with sovereign bonds. Ultimately, we are committed to delivering positive outcomes that benefit all stakeholders. We then sent in, it is recommended that National Treasury reevaluates outdated public policy choices, contributing to the budget and fiscal crisis, seeking alternative approaches to stimulate growth and deviate from anti-growth policies. The response to us was an outline of National Treasury's budget process is contained in various budget documents such as the MTBPS and BR that are subject to public scrutiny and parliamentary oversight. The Western Cape participates in these processes through the Budget Council and Budget Forum processes. Then we sent in, it is recommended that National Treasury embraces subsidiarity and allocative efficiency principles by devolving certain powers to capable provinces and metros, fostering greater operational efficiency not currently forecasted in the DORA Bill 2023. They then responded, we acknowledge the potential benefits of devolving certain powers to provinces and metros to achieve efficiency and improve service delivery. We will collaborate with relevant stakeholders to identify areas where this approach could be effective. For instance, we are exploring the devolution of certain provincial bus routes to the city of Cape Town. However, we will proceed cautiously to avoid any potential pitfalls along the way. So that links up with the previous indication that they supported. Then we sent in, it is recommended that National Treasury considers integration of conditional grants into the PAYS formula to balance flexibility with budget stability. They responded, the National Treasury is currently undertaking a review of the conditional grants. The recommendation will be we'll consider it as part of that process. So we're not going to get an answer right now. Then the next one, it is recommended that National Treasury advocates for child-friendly budget documentation to make financial information accessible to all ages and foster long-term benefits through youth education and government budgeting. They said the National Treasury welcomes and notes the recommendation. I'm not sure if they can implement it, but I guess they welcomed it. Then it is recommended the National Treasury focuses, I'm on page 19, focuses on current population data for informed budget decisions, ensuring funds are allocated where needed most due to shifts in population distribution. The response was, I think this is the same response as the previous pairs, but I'm going to read it anyway. Allocation methodologies that use population data to determine allocations will not be updated to use the 2022 census data for the 2024 DORB. This was agreed to by the Technical Committee on Finance, Technical Budget Forum, Budget Council, and Budget Forum. The reasons for not using the 2022 census in 2024, including the following: the census data was released too late into the budget process, and as such, the data could not be used for the allocation. The 2022 census data is being released in parts, and not all data that is required to make updates to both equitable share formulae is available. Where data is available, it has not yet been disaggregated to a level that is needed to make updates in the 2024 Division of Revenue. It is recommended that National Treasury investigates the causes of underspending before reallocating funds to local governments to ensure effective utilization. The respondent recommendation is noted. National Treasury remains committed to proactively addressing issues related to I think they meant to say underspending, not understanding. Just fix that quickly, underspending, and taking necessary measures to enhance the effectiveness of funds by local government. Some of the corrective measures include engagement with relevant stakeholders to address the root causes of underspending. We sent in, it is recommended that National Treasury establishes a formal process for human rights legal impact assessments to uphold human rights standards in budget decisions. It just said recommendation noted. I'm not sure if that's a welcoming or implementation. It just says noted. Then we sent the following recommendation should have been, it's a response from them to us. Okay, the following recommendation should have been considered as part of the fiscal framework that has already been adopted by Select Committee on Appropriations. Just a note before I continue reading, as a province, we're not part of the fiscal framework that is dealt with by the Select Committee on Appropriations, but I'm going to continue reading this anyway. When a fiscal framework has been adopted, it has become difficult to make changes that deviate significantly from the agreed upon framework. It is recommended, then they just repeated what we recommended. It is recommended that National Treasury acknowledges the focus on consumer welfare in VAT recommendations and suggests a comprehensive economic impact analysis before implementing adjustments. Recommended the National Treasury directs borrowing towards capital expenditure to stimulate job creation in the economy, prioritizing it over funding current expenditure. And in line with public participation comments received, it is recommended that the National Treasury does not increase VAT. Further, it is recommended that National Treasury reduces the VAT burden on a larger basket of food items in order to reduce the impact of the increased cost of living impact on consumers. So the last 1, 2, 3, 4 recommendations they threw out because they want us to do that as part of the fiscal framework, but unfortunately provinces do not form part of the fiscal framework in the Select Committee on Appropriations at a national level. So I'm counting, let me just quickly count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 out of the 26 recommendations that we sent in were either noted or responded to in general. 3 to 4, well, the last one was actually 2, so let's say 3, even though it's 4. 3 were thrown out because of the fiscal framework. That takes us to 9. So 17 of our recommendations we're not changing the bill. Colleagues, with having read all of those pages into the record, I do take note that we got the document while we were all in the sitting of the MTBPS approximately 10 o'clock today, as well as the fact that we had to move our final mandate meeting from yesterday, which I would like to thank the members, even though we have a short truncated timeline that we get every year from the Division of Revenue from the NCOP. I would now like to hear the members' views.
Thank you, Chairperson. Based on our negotiating mandate and the responses that we've heard today that we received in the direct record, I would propose that our final mandate remains the same as the negotiating mandate, that we're not supporting the bill. And given the analysis of the responses that you have provided us with, that it would appear that our recommendations that were submitted in the negotiating mandate were not taken seriously. The responses were broad and general and non-committal, etc. And on the basis of that, I would further propose then that we approach the Speaker for legal advice as to whether the NCOP meaningfully considered our negotiating mandate based on the responses that we received. And if not, we don't know. I mean, we can explore that. If they have not, it's a tick box exercise, and I've experienced it in my committee as well, that the Speaker should legally challenge the NCOP in a negotiating mandate process, because we need a declaration from a court that would compel the NCOP to treat negotiating mandates very seriously, because we expend a lot of energy and costs in developing negotiating mandates by embarking on expensive ads in the paper, have public meetings with the residents of the Western Cape and other interested stakeholders. And then we formulate this negotiating mandate, and then it is just treated merely as a tick box exercise. So if we can get a authoritative sort of expression from our courts that will compel the NCOP to treat negotiating mandates with the seriousness that it deserves, then it would be first prize. So therefore, Chairperson, in conclusion, I would propose that we object in our final mandate, and not only in substance, but also in the fact that we were supposed to have had this meeting yesterday, and we have it today, and I mean, it's just unacceptable that we are being treated like this. You know, that that the NCOP is in such a shambles that it cannot stick to its own timelines. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. The draft minutes were also sent to everyone, and our requests for amendments were not considered. I'm reading them. And here on page 11 of the draft minutes of the NCOP, all the mandates were just generally adopted. Any other views, Member Mvimbi?
Thank you very much, Person. Just a point of clarity before I make my comment or my views. Are we taking a legal opinion internally? Are we requesting a legal opinion internally, because I believe we've got quite a number of advocates inside the Parliament, or are we going to take external legal opinion from commercial advocates or commercial lawyers outside? Just want clarity on that.
Okay. So the way I understand the process is, if we are questioning the negotiating mandate process, we as a committee has to ask the Speaker for help in terms of legal opinion. But I'm assuming that would start internally, and if the Speaker deems it fit, he would go externally. So whether he goes externally or not will not be up to us. Because when you challenge, for example, legislation, the committee cannot challenge legislation. It has to be the Speaker of your Parliament that has to challenge it on behalf of a committee. So we would essentially refer this question, this legal question, to the Speaker for assistance. And if he deems so fit, he would then consider it and let us know what his decision is in this regard. Ms. Kamish, am I understanding the process correctly? Okay.
Then thanks, Chair. No, I understand that. Just wary of the cost. We are always cautious of not wanting to spend money for frivolous legal processes. Now we are going to do this very same thing. I know most members of the provincial legislature and even at national, they always complain about when local government and municipalities are taking legal opinions left, right, and center. We seem to be now wanting to fall on the same road. I understand the speaker. Preferably, can we request that we use, in order to avoid unnecessary costs, can you request the speaker to actually procure those services internally in the interest of saving costs? Because we've got quite a number of advocates that are employed by parliament, even by provincial parliament, and then maybe I think it will be best. That will be my suggestion. Secondly, I think I will always will not agree with using legal processes to fight political processes, because the issue of a mandate is not a legal process. It's a political process where the NCOP has got all the powers to agree or not to agree with us politically. It goes the same way here. There are a lot of things that as a minority party, we don't agree with you. We don't agree with the DA when they take issues. We believe that that's their role and responsibility. You've been elected by the people to take that decision. You don't always have, if you don't agree with us, we accept that, We are not going to use legal route to fight political fights, because I think what we are doing here now, we are using a judicial process or legal process to fight a political fight. So it's in that regard that I will not agree with it. And then also in that regard, also I would like to say that, of course, the minority view, we did express our minority view that to support the bill. We support the bill. But also, Chair, while on it, can you please, because I remember also now, we also said that we even requested other members to make oral submissions. I did not make oral submission, but I know Honorable Brengis made an oral submission. Can his oral submission be recorded? He even said it in Arabic, but obviously, if to people, we can always ask him what was he to say it. Maybe in English, because I remember he even quoted from the Quran, which I think that because I remember specifically you asked, are there any members who want to make oral submission? I said no, from my side as the ANC. Then Honorable Brengis made his oral submission, even quoting from the Quran. So can we have those also recorded as such?
Ms. Carmen should have to assist me here, but my understanding of when we put our respective submissions, while we respect all religions, or respect all cultures and all languages, the only languages that we are able to work with at the moment in the Western Cape are the official ones, which is English, Afrikaans, Xhosa, and now it is sign language as well. Is that my understanding? My understanding also of the submission wasn't that it was a submission, that it was a prayer to ask us and to try and convince us to say we must be grateful for what we're getting. I don't know what the words were in Arabic. I don't know what the words mean in Arabic. I don't know what was referred to in Arabic. So I can't even respond to you in terms of substance. However, my plea would be the reason why the Western Cape Provincial Parliament specifically separated the public hearing from the negotiating mandate stage, which has never been done before. This is now the second year that we're doing it. And I think we're actually the only province that does it in this particular fashion, is so that members have the opportunity between what we get and the briefing and the public hearings and what we can submit, that we submit it. We did ask, here are the times, please submit before these times. And despite that, I still allowed for oral submissions from respective political parties. So I thought to myself, okay, if people still want to make an input on to say we must recommend X or we must recommend Y, let us do that. So my plea would be in the next budget cycle, that if there is a particular submission, if we could use one of the official languages, if the member wishes to, he can maybe consult the speaker, whether the speaker is able to assist him with translation with what do you call it, translation services, if for future submissions perhaps.
Could I just know in the chairperson?
Ms. Kamish Ahmad said he did translate. Was it that he's basically asking us to accept and be grateful? Was
Yeah,
that it?
yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to rely on my procedural officer because I don't know Arabic. Ms. Kamish Ahmad, can you just quickly explain that, please? Because it's okay. So in short, Ms. Kamish Ahmad captures what is procedural, and in terms of that, there was no particular recommendation in that regard. Is that my understanding? Okay. Colleagues, I have received two indications on the view for the final mandate and separate proposed resolution. The first proposal was that we object to the bill, and Member Mvimbi also indicated that he proposes that we support the bill. Then let me deal with the bill mandate first. Members? Member Fry, are you standing in for Member Murray?
Thank you, Chair. I propose that we not support the bill.
Okay, I also do not support the bill. Going once, going twice. Okay, so there's no, I've already heard Member America. So there's 3 not support for the final mandate and 1 to support the bill. That's A and C. And then there was a resolution. The resolution was to ask the speaker, oh, just so by the way, it will first be internal through the speaker's office. We do not have the power to seek external legal opinion without the speaker making that decision. Whether the speaker goes externally for legal opinion or not, or legal counsel or not, that is the prerogative of the speaker. And my understanding is he may even need to go to the state attorney first, but that is all procedures that are in the speaker's office, and we are not able to dictate for the speaker. That's a bad word, but essentially dictate for the speaker which process he uses. And it is actually a legal process because it's based on the Mandating Act as well as court judgments dealing with meaningful public participation and the legislative process because it is a Section 76 bill in terms of the Constitution, just for that clarity. Ms. Kamish Ahmad, if we can just put up the final mandate for us.
I'm just typing it out, Chair.
Colleague, what I'm going to do while Ms. Kamish Ahmad puts up the mandate is I'm going to postpone the minutes to the next meeting, just so that Ms. Kamish Ahmad has enough time to send our final mandate in before the 4 o'clock NCOP meeting. It's 4 o'clock, right?
Tomorrow.
Is it tomorrow? Oh, thank goodness. Okay, but then we can deal with the minutes then if you wish. Yeah. Sorry, I thought it was this afternoon.
Sorry.
Chair, I begrudgingly support that. I begrudgingly support that.
Colleagues, I do apologize. This is the unfortunate thing about budget. When Mero and Pero and budget gets tabled, we don't have an end time. The end time is when we finish. Okay, let me quickly just read it. Final mandate stage report of the Budget Committee on the Revision of Revenue Amendment Bill. Isn't it? It's B33. Okay, let's just fix that. B33 of 2023 NCOP dated 28 November 2023. Yesterday is the 28th, as follows. The Budget Committee, having considered the subject of the Revision of Revenue Amendment Bill B33 2023 NCOP referred to it in accordance Standing Rule 217, recommends that the House confers on the Western Cape's delegation in the National Council of Provinces the authority to not support the bill. In accordance with Standing Rule 90, the African National Congress expresses minority view to support the bill report to be considered. If I could have a mover for the report. Member Fry.
I so move.
Thank you. If I can have a second.
Second that.
Thank you, Member America. The report is so adopted. Is everyone happy with the resolution going to the Speaker? Okay, in order, we are asking the speaker for legal advice on whether the NCOP has meaningfully considered our negotiating mandate, and if not, to possibly challenge it in that regard. Okay. Then we go over to our minutes. And thank you, colleagues, for your patience. Budget might be very technical, but it is important. Okay, page 1 of
The 23rd.
23rd of November. Okay, just our attendance there. Okay, so we can go down. I love it when extra people attend. That's page 1. You can go down. Okay, that was the briefing. You can go down. I just put resolutions and actions in bold, but that's not really an amendment. That's a just putting it in bold. Okay. If I could have a mover for the minutes, please. Members America and Vimby and myself were the ones who are present, just in case people.
Move that we adopt.
Thank you, Member America. Could I have a seconder for the report? Member Vimby's hand is up, so that we have a second. Thank you so much. The minutes are so adopted. Could we have the next one? That's okay. It's been a long day. Our English is running out.
25th of November.
Okay. You can just check our attendance there. Okay. Then page 1, that was the Mero. Page 2. Okay. Okay. Page 2. Just quickly go up quickly by the A's and the no's. Oh, that was the A's of the motion by America. Okay, and then go down. Just go down quickly. Let me just try and have you sent it to me?
No, wait. Let me just see.
Almost done, colleagues. We're almost done.
Chairperson, I propose that we adopt the minutes.
Okay, thank you so much. If I could have a seconder for the report, for the minutes. Member Vimby, is the minutes a correct reflection? Because remember, Member Fry wasn't here, otherwise I have to second. Okay, thank you so much. I have a seconder for the report. The minutes are so adopted. Colleagues, thank you so much. Not only for today, for the robust discussion and for staying so long and deliberation, but also for your patience and your flexibility and adaptability during the division of revenue adjustment process. It's not been an easy year, and it's the first time that we've really experienced so many difficulties on DORA, and I really appreciate the support from the committee in this respect.
From our side, thank you, Chairperson Nosiima, for your hard work and steering us towards this difficult process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, especially Ms. Kamish Ahmad and Jumpela. Thank you so much. The committee is thus adjourned.